Chapter 681, A New Beginning. 2 days later, the Hokage election concluded. No surprises this time. Po-Feng Shuiman was chosen as the 4th Hokage, officially stepping onto history's stage. As is often the case when a new ruler ascends, the old guard, including the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi, retired at once, and many long-serving advisors relinquished their posts. In their place, a wave of younger shinobi filled the village's administrative halls, infusing Konoha with fresh energy and a palpable sense of possibility. That very morning, Nathan finished his routine chores, washed up, and left the courtyard in search of breakfast. Along the path, he passed clusters of fellow ninjas already up and training at first light. Their eyes glowed with hope, every movement brimming with unspoken ambition. Nathan couldn't help but shake his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. If only they knew that Po-Feng Shuiman's reign as 4th Hokage was destined to last just 1 year. I'm at a loss for words. Nathan! A familiar voice called from behind. Nathan turned and saw Uchiha Mizu standing before him. Mizu, everything all right? Nathan frowned in confusion. Yeah, fine. Mizu shook his head, his gaze drifting over Nathan's cultivation robes. Training again? Nathan nodded openly. There was no point in hiding it. Mizu's expression softened with genuine admiration. You're really dedicated. Nathan, at a loss for a reply, quickly changed the subject. You're up early too. Where are you off to? Like Nathan, Mizu was dressed in martial arts attire and looked ready for action. He offered an eager smile. I've got some business to take care of. I need to get there as soon as possible. 4th generation? Nathan asked hesitantly. Nathan gazed at the Hokage Tower from across the way. The windows were still lit, even at this hour. He shook his head and muttered, Those elders sure are diligent. Shisui Uchiha paused mid-stride and, hearing Nathan's sigh, gave a brisk nod. Yes. Nathan saw the familiar gleam of amusement in Shisui's eyes and chose not to elaborate. I won't keep you, he said. Go on ahead. All right. Shisui bowed, then turned to go. Nathan watched him walk away, until suddenly Shisui stopped, pivoted, and called back over his shoulder, Don't get too hung up on the spirit retrieval mission. Without another word, he melted into the shadows. Nathan allowed himself a small, wry smile. He knew Shisui well enough to be sure he suspected Nathan of risking everything to protect the retrieval team for the Uchiha clan. In truth, Nathan simply couldn't stomach another meeting with Danzo. Stirring up a little chaos had been the easiest way to keep his distance. Fair enough, Nathan whispered to the empty street. He turned and walked off, leaving his half-truth comfortably unchallenged. Nathan slipped away before dawn, moving through the village with quiet purpose. After a quick, satisfying meal, he set out for the lone island that served as his private training ground. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Nathan had already recalled his shadow clone. As he absorbed the morning's hour of intense practice, digesting every motion, every sensation, he felt a profound shift in his chakra. What had once been his Feng Shuan, spiral hand-sword technique, now blossomed into the perfected form of Feng Yu, spiral sword. 2 weeks of relentless training had finally pushed his proficiency past the 20,000-point mark, making him the first S-class shinobi ever to achieve such a breakthrough. Nathan's eyes glowed with excitement as the news registered in his mind. He rose, surveying the island below. This place had forged him. He wouldn't defile it simply to demonstrate his power. Respecting his sanctuary, he vowed to test his new skills without causing needless destruction. Gathering his chakra, Nathan executed a rapid series of hand seals. A gust of wind erupted around him as he unleashed wind release, great wings. Almost simultaneously, a protective aura of chakra formed around his body, chakra armor, shimmering in vibrant hues. With his upgraded jutsu at the ready, Nathan prepared to push himself even further. Nathan streaked through the sky at breakneck speed, heading straight for the sea. He'd only a vague memory of the place, a vacant island he'd earmarked as a makeshift shooting range, but the coordinates were clear enough. Minutes later, he hovered above a barren strip of land 200 meters long and 50 meters wide, devoid of trees or any sign of life. He reached up and pressed the guardian seal at his brow, activating its power. Focusing his spirit, he swept his gaze around. No anomalies, no chakra readings or traces of smoke within a 1-kilometer radius. Satisfied, he dropped closer until his feet skimmed the water's surface. chakra pooling in his soles to keep him aloft exactly 100 meters from shore. Drawing in a steady breath, he formed the precise hand seals and unleashed his ninjutsu, Wind Surge, Spiral Sword. The air screamed as it tore apart. Zzz! That high-pitched roar slamming against Nathan's eardrums and drawing an involuntary frown to his face. Nathan stared at the massive chakra-infused blade hovering above his right palm, feeling as though he were clutching a ticking bomb. Its volatile aura seemed poised to explode at any second. Yet when he relaxed his chakra senses and examined it closely, he realized the fear was entirely unfounded. Inside, the weapon's framework was rock solid, far sturdier than any technique he'd mastered before. Its aggressive shimmer came only from the sheer volume of chakra contained within, not from any real instability. He could, if he wished, dispel the ninjutsu tying him to the blade and reclaim it in an instant, recovering at least 70% of the chakra he'd invested. That alone underscored the gulf between a level 9 and a level 10 technique. No wonder the entry requirement soared past 100,000 skill points. It was absolutely worth it. Satisfied, Nathan shifted his stance. He pivoted 30 degrees, aligning his body and the deserted island beyond him into the new trajectory. With a steady breath, he launched the Fengshuan Spiral Sword. The blade whistled through the air, trailing ripples of condensed chakra as it flew toward its unseen target. Silence fell for a heartbeat, broken only by the hum of residual energy. Nathan let his senses extend outward, ready to gauge the outcome of his strike. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that mastering a technique of this magnitude was just the beginning. In the next instant, I saw the enormous chakra sword spin free, slicing a graceful, moon-shaped arc across the water before plunging with deadly precision onto the desert island. Boom! A deafening explosion rocked the sea, sending waves churning wildly. When the smoke finally cleared, the barren isle lay split in two massive halves, as if some invisible hand had crushed it from within. Chapter 682, Acceleration. Nathan stood once more on the wind-blasted desert island, its cracked ground and shattered rocks testament to the power he'd just unleashed. A satisfied smile curved his lips. With the newly mastered Fengshuan Spiral Sword, whose blades now twisted and pivoted mid-flight, he'd added a technique nearly as lethal as his Susanoo armor. Of course, its raw power came at a steep price. The spiral sword devoured chakra like a ravenous beast. Only someone with Nathan's prodigious reserves could sustain it. Yet that very consumption was its strength, channeling overwhelming force into every strike. He shut out the wind and, centering his thoughts, Nathan summoned his mental interface. "Panel," he murmured. Instantly, the proficiency screen flickered to life before his mind's eye, ready to display the next step in his relentless pursuit of power. Suddenly, a familiar pale blue, translucent curtain of light rippled into view before Nathan. Lines of glowing text scrolled across its surface, detailing his latest status updates. Name, Uchiha Nathan, age 13, physique 22, spirit 22, chakra 299,060, bloodline, Sharingan, Mangekyo Sharingan, 38,256 50,000. Buy-in affinity, 1,000 skills, chakra refinement. Level 6, 1,836 10,000. Water release, Great Water Burst, Level 7, 10,165 20,000. Lightning Eye, Thunderlight Level 1, 6,200. Earth release, Great Earth Surge, Level 5, 3,400. Multi-Shadow Clone Technique, Level 8, 41,090 Than. Sword and Shadow Step, Level 8, 37,450. Flying Thunder God Technique, Level 5, 855,000. Genjutsu, Dark Void 5, 3,550 5,000. Nirvana Square Technique, Level 5, 3,600 5,000. Four Elephant Seal, Level 6, 550 Tenzin. Self-Discipline Seal, Level 6, 990 10,000. Chakra Scalpel, Level 7, 4,500 20,000. Shadow Sword, Level 6, 5,500. Chakra Control, Level 6, 7,850 10,000. Mastered Techniques. Lightning Light Sword, Level 7. Earth Release, Heart Cleaving Strike, Level 5. Wind Release, Spiral Sword, Level 10. Nathan watched as the numbers climbed. Most notably, his mastery of Wind Release Spiral Sword had surged to Level 10, a leap that had already noticeably sharpened his chakra control. With his newfound strength reflected in every stat, he felt the familiar rush of potential and the promise of even greater power to come. Nathan stared at the status panel. His chakra control proficiency had just jumped by over 1/1500 points, bringing him that much closer to level 7. The improvement also trimmed the chakra cost of all his other techniques, only by a few points apiece, but enough to make each skill noticeably more efficient. He shifted his attention from chakra control to the mastery bars of the other abilities he'd been honing: Tuyu, Tuchai Dahe, Fantasy, Darkness Technique, and the Nirvana Square skill. All of them showed impressive gains, with even the slowest progress now solidly in level 5 territory. Most striking of all was Tuyu, Beheading in the Heart, which had reached completion just 10 days ago. The 40,000 chakra points he had set aside for that technique were immediately funneled into practicing self-curse. That massive influx vaulted self-curse from 1,395,000 at level 5 straight up to 9,910,000 at level 6, already surpassing the 4 elephant seals 5,500/10,000. At their current rate, both self-curse and the 4 elephant seal are poised to hit level 7 1 or 2 days ahead of schedule. Nathan paused to run through his figures one more time. He was on the very cusp of a class promotion, reach the next rank, and he'd unlock the 4 elephant seal, a formidable technique that would make capturing tailed beasts almost routine. That breakthrough alone would transform every mission. But first came his plans for the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Over the past weeks, he'd stockpiled 159,000 chakra points by channeling energy through the Fengshuan Spiral Sword. Now he intended to pour every last point into Flying Thunder God. With his regular daily investment factored in, the technique's total chakra reserve would climb to an astonishing 209,000 points. At the standard conversion, 1 proficiency point earned for every 150 chakra, that sum translated into about 1,390 proficiency points. Nathan was already at proficiency level 5 with 850 out of 5,000 points. A few moments of calculation told him that in under 10 days of dedicated training, he could push Flying Thunder God all the way up to level 7. A level 7 Flying Thunder God would give him instant, near-zero cooldown teleportation, an absolute game-changer that would make every future operation immeasurably safer and more efficient. Meanwhile, his writing evolution skill was poised on the brink of its next breakthrough as well. He'd amassed 40,000 out of the 45,000 points needed, meaning in roughly 9 days that ceiling would shatter. That evolution would boost his spirit attribute, expand his daily free chakra limit, and accelerate all of his cultivation. All that remained was patience and consistency. Over the coming week and a half, Nathan would see 2 critical milestones achieved. When they arrived, he would stand leagues ahead of his rivals and ready to face his next challenge. Nathan stared at his skill panel, realizing that, given enough time, he could eventually hone every jutsu to perfection. But he couldn't afford to wait too long. His Shadow Clone's latest reconnaissance had uncovered Takigakure's plan. They intended to seal the Seven Tails into a new Jinchuriki. If they succeeded, even if Nathan claimed the beast afterward, tapping into its chakra would be riddled with complications, and he refused to carry such a burden. He had to move before Takigakure did. Only by securing the Seven Tails now could he ensure its power remained safe and harmless. Resolute, Nathan closed the panel and gathered his chakra. He didn't linger. Summoning wind-style, wind wings, he sprouted swift, invisible currents beneath him. At the same time, he wove the chakra feather cloak around his frame, each feather a glimmering shard of wind and energy. With a powerful burst, he shot skyward and sped off toward the island. Nathan stepped onto the island again a few minutes later. He spread his hands, channeled his chakra, and activated the multiple shadow clone technique. In an instant, 9 identical Nathans materialized, each one eager to train. The original Nathan settled onto a smooth rock, closed his eyes, and began refining his chakra flow and footwork, while the clones slipped silently into the forest ringing Takigakure village, scouting for any weakness in its defenses. Takigakure village lies deep within the land of waterfalls, carved into sheer cliffs and endlessly drenched by tumbling cascades. Winding mountain passes and perpetual mist have deterred full-scale invasions throughout the three great ninja wars. No major power has ever managed to conquer it, making large-scale assaults all but impossible. As a result, Takigakure's shinobi never endured the same life-or-death pressure other villages faced. Survival here was a near certainty, and without that urgency, their skills plateaued. Complacency bred discord. Rival clans squabbled endlessly, loyalties shifted at the slightest provocation, and the village's unity crumbled. Nathan recognized the opportunity in their disarray. With nothing more than a few carefully placed bribes and convincing whispers, he had planted spies throughout the village. Guards, traders, even low-ranking instructors. Each agent was ready to feed him vital intelligence. Under the fading light, the clone's reports began to reach him. Guard rotations followed a rigid schedule. The eastern gate remained unwatched for a full 3 minutes every hour. Supply caravans moved along the riverbank with minimal escort. Most importantly, the village council had dismissed any threat of an outside attack, leaving them dangerously overconfident. Satisfied, Nathan summoned back his clones, reabsorbing them into his own form. He rose to his feet, the corners of his mouth curving into a determined smile. Tomorrow night, when the moon slipped behind the eastern peak, he'd slip into Takigakure's heart and strike with the precision only he could muster. In the land of untested shinobi, Nathan would rewrite the rules. Nathan's memories from his previous life granted him a kind of foresight. He'd already guessed the plans of Takigakure's high-ranking officials, and now it was time to investigate more closely. After waiting patiently, he spotted a Takigakure jonin leaving the village gates with 3 genin in tow, no doubt bound for some mission. Without a second thought, Nathan slipped into their wake. In a small ninja settlement like Takigakure, jonin were rarely exceptional. Their shallow talent pool made it impossible to choose only the finest shinobi, and lax promotion standards often let less capable fighters slip through. Confident he wouldn't be noticed, Nathan tailed the group from a distance. All that remained was to incapacitate the jonin, assume his identity, and slip unchallenged into the very heart of Takigakure. Chapter 683, Easy to Win. 3 days later, late in the afternoon, the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Deep in the forest, a short distance from Takigakure village, a party of 4 shinobi, 1 burly veteran and 3 younger ninja, picked their way along a winding mountain trail. Snatches of their conversation drifted through the trees. Their assignment was complete, and they were eager to return home. Unseen above them, perched in the sturdy boughs of a tall cedar, was Nathan's latest shadow clone. For 3 days it had tailed the group, invisibly mapping their progress and learning their routine. Now, as the 4 shinobi neared a fork in the path, Nathan judged the moment ripe for action. Silently, he formed a series of hand seals. A ripple of distorted air spread outward as he activated his illusion technique, Nirvana Jingshe. Below, the unsuspecting ninja slowed, sensing something amiss. Behind the illusion's curtain, Nathan's true body remained hidden, having already dissolved his previous clone to replenish his chakra reserves. Fresh and focused, he'd spawned this new copy just in time to deliver the decisive strike. The trapped shinobi exchanged wary glances, their confidence shaken. They'd completed their mission, but now found themselves caught in a carefully laid trap. Nathan watched with cold satisfaction, certain the outcome would be as easy as he had planned. Nathan had synchronized all the skills he'd honed over the past days into his shadow clone, which was why the Nirvana Jingsha technique it executed now struck with such force. In a heartbeat, the 3 young genin collapsed, slipping into unconsciousness. Across the clearing, the Takigakure jonin, Mizutani Yuichi, didn't go down so easily. Though he was only an average jonin from a small village, his years of experience told him something was amiss the moment feathers drifted into his vision. Genjutsu, he muttered, immediately forming a hand seal. He channeled his chakra, and the illusory feathers vanished. Nathan, realizing his illusion had been dispelled, let his hands fall and exhaled softly. The faint shift in his breathing betrayed his position, and Yuichi's sharp eyes snapped toward Nathan's hiding spot. Caught in the act, Nathan's shoulders tensed as he tried to look innocent. He flicked open a pouch, lobbed several kunai in Yuichi's direction, then melted back into the shadows, ready to press the advantage. Yuichi Mizutani didn't rush in after him at once. First, he raised his own kunai and deflected Nathan's throw. Then, with a quick glance, he confirmed that his 3 teammates lay unconscious but unharmed on the ground. Satisfied they were safe, he melded into the shadows and gave chase, though not before extending his chakra to scan the perimeter. No one else was nearby. Only then did he allow himself a small measure of relief. He hadn't meant to pursue Nathan indefinitely. Once it became clear he couldn't catch up, he would turn back. But Nathan had clearly led him here for a purpose, and Yuichi wasn't about to let him slip away. In a blink, he reappeared directly in Nathan's path, kunai still at the ready. He studied the younger ninja coolly, every bit the seasoned shinobi poised for battle. "Who are you, and what are you up to?" Yuichi's voice was low, edged with steel. "Why lure me here?" He already suspected the answer. Nathan had deliberately drawn him to this spot. Relying on his own experience as a senior ninja, Yuichi had seized the opportunity to follow. And as for why Nathan was known as cunning, the reason was all too simple. Nathan didn't reveal his real face at first. Instead, he cast a transformation jutsu, wiping away any village markings and taking on the guise of a fully grown adult. Unfortunately, he'd prepared the disguise in haste, and a careful observer could still spot inconsistencies. Realizing his ruse wouldn't hold, Nathan dropped the jutsu with a flick of his hand, allowing his true, youthful features to reappear. Mizutani Yuichi's eyes darted across Nathan's face, and his expression darkened the moment he recognized the hidden leaf headband and the Uchiha clan crest. Neither Konoha nor the Uchiha were names a jonin from a small, obscure village could afford to provoke. A flicker of unease crossed his face. Then, as though a long-lost memory had resurfaced, his features froze in shock. He swallowed hard, disbelief in his voice as he whispered, "Ghostblade Nathan? Konoha Gemini!" On the battlefield, Nathan had earned the moniker, Ghost Sword. Paired with Uchiha Shisui, the two were mockingly, and perhaps begrudgingly, dubbed the Konoha Gemini. It was both a grudging compliment and a slight, for it suggested that Konoha's greatest geniuses were confined to a single clan, as if the village had no other stars. Yet despite the political undercurrents, the reputation Nathan had carved out was real and dangerous. There'd been no intention of letting his opponent walk away. As soon as those thoughts flickered through his mind, Nathan's Sharingan erupted into 3 Magatama, the crimson glaives of his vision unfolding. In the next heartbeat, he unleashed his signature instant sword technique and swept forward at Mizutani Yuichi. Clang! Steel rang out as Nathan's blade met the flat of Yuichi's kunai. The young shinobi had reacted with lightning speed, refusing to let his guard down for even a breath. But defenses only delayed the inevitable, and Nathan's cold certainty remained unshaken. Nathan's blade glanced off Yuichi's guard, but he made no sound of frustration. In a heartbeat, he sheathed the long knife and dissolved into shadow, reappearing at Yuichi's side like a ghost. Swish! His cleaver arced through the air again. Mizutani Yuichi slammed his sword against the incoming edge, sparks flying where steel met steel. Nathan split his form on contact, then reassembled and struck once more. At first, Yuichi matched his speed, foot for foot, blade for blade, but after only a dozen parries, his arms began to tremble. Sensing the opening, Nathan wove together his illusion sword technique and shadow sword technique in one seamless motion. The knife bit deep into Yuichi's forearm with a wet, tearing sound. Crimson droplets spattered the ground. Ugh! Yuichi gritted his teeth against the pain, refusing to yield even for a heartbeat. He managed one last block before stumbling back to put distance between them. But Nathan wasn't about to let him recover. With a low whisper of ki, he vanished again, activating the illusion darkness walking technique. In the dim light, all that remained was the faint echo of his steps, and the promise that he would strike before Yuichi could catch his breath. Before Yuichi Mizutani could even blink, his world went black. Darkness descended like a silken shroud, cutting off every point of light. Disoriented and unable to see a thing, he had no time to brace for what came next. Nathan had been ready. With a swift gesture, he unleashed the seal of self-inflicted curse binding. Fiery red talismans flared around Yuichi's wrists and ankles, snapping him rigidly in place. Before Yuichi could struggle, Nathan reshaped the chakra in his right palm into a shimmering blade. With 3 precise slashes of the chakra scalpel, the muscles and nerves in Yuichi's arms were severed, rendering his limbs useless. Nathan wasn't finished. He extended his left hand, gathering chakra into a perfect sphere, the Rasengan. Without hesitation, he slammed it into Yuichi's chest. The impact cracked cartilage and fractured part of his sternum in an instant. A horrific crack echoed as Yuichi arched backward, blood gushing from his lips. Only then did Nathan lift his illusion, darkness walking technique. Light rushed back into Yuichi's sight, but the momentary relief was shattered. He barely had the strength to raise his head before 2 blazing crimson Sharingan suddenly filled his vision, their cold gaze promising even greater danger. Genjutsu, Sharingan. Nathan stepped forward and unleashed the technique, seizing control of his target's mind. He sifted through the man's memory, extracting every piece of information he needed. Once he'd secured the intel, he planned to assume the man's identity and slip into Takegakure village undetected. Inside, he would probe deeper into the mysteries surrounding the 7 tails, and when every detail was in place, he would move to claim the beast for himself. Chapter 684, Disguise and Infiltration. Time passed slowly, each minute slipping into the next. Before long, more than half an hour had gone by. The sun sank lower in the western sky, its rays piercing the forest canopy and lighting up the clearing where 2 figures stood motionless, facing one another. No words passed between them, no movement broke the stillness. The scene felt frozen in time. The pair were Nathan and Mizutani Yuichi. For the past 30 minutes, Nathan had been sifting through Yuichi's memories with his Sharingan, extracting every detail he could, guard rotations, building layouts, access codes. His mental discipline and mastery of the illusion Sharingan had carried him through, even when the torrent of memories threatened to overwhelm him. At last, Nathan withdrew his gaze and blinked. For a heartbeat, his eyes held a faint, dazed look, the inevitable aftershock of absorbing so much information so quickly, before clarity returned. He took a steadying breath and studied Yuichi's figure, the precise cut of his uniform, the way he carried himself, the slight irregularities in his posture. These would be key to Nathan's disguise. He sensed Yuichi's breath, calm and measured, then shifted his attention to the stolen intelligence now solidifying in his mind. Everything he needed was there, the timetables, the patrol routes, the security codes. With this knowledge, he could slip inside unseen. Nathan closed his eyes, centering himself. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. When he reopened them, determination shone in his gaze. The time for planning was over. Now came the moment to put everything he'd learned to use, and to become someone else entirely. Nathan's fingers wove a precise series of seals, and with a sharp exhale he unleashed his transformation technique. A swirl of chakra-infused smoke billowed around him, and when the haze cleared, standing in his place was an exact replica of Mizutani Yuichi. Nathan had honed this disguise to perfection. Every feature, every nuance, matched the real Yuichi so precisely that even a close observer unfamiliar with Nathan wouldn't notice a thing. Satisfied with his copy, Nathan flicked his wrist and shaped chakra into the form of a scalpel. In a single fluid motion, he slashed across the double's throat. The illusory Yuichi let out a strangled gasp before the guise dissolved in a puff of smoke. Behind him, the real Mizutani Yuichi collapsed, his eyes wide and panicked. As he struggled to draw breath, he stared into the face of the attacker, not the Nathan he knew, but the face of himself. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered in Yuichi's eyes, as if he'd glimpsed his own reflection in a broken mirror. Then recognition dawned, and a desperate glint sparked in his gaze. Yuichi's lips trembled, as if he'd found the right words, but no sound came. Instead, he coughed violently, blood flecking the ground at his chin. Nathan simply stood there, expression unreadable, watching the life ebb from his foe. The courtyard lay silent, save for Mizutani Yuichi's ragged breathing and the cold finality of Nathan's victory. Nathan watched Mizutani Yuichi's breathing slow to a stop. Within moments, Yuichi lay utterly still. Nathan knelt beside him, removed the Takegakure forehead protector and ninja tool pouch from Yuichi's belt, then rose swiftly. Forming the familiar seals, he called upon his chakra and unleashed his signature jutsu, fire style, incendiary fumigation. An orb of searing flame flared to life between Nathan's palms and engulfed Yuichi's body in an instant. The blaze roared, reducing flesh and bone to a smoldering pile of ash. As soon as the fire died down, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, scattering the ashes into the surrounding forest until not a trace remained. Satisfied that no evidence of their battle remained, Nathan donned the stolen forehead protector, slung the ninja pouch across his shoulder, and sprinted down the mountain path toward the three genin. They lay where he'd left them, locked in a deep, illusion-induced slough. When he reached them, Nathan gathered his chakra, traced the necessary seals in the air, and channeled a gentle wave of energy into each of their bodies. One by one, the young ninjas stirred. Their eyes fluttered open, and they sat up, rubbing sleep from their eyes as they took in their surroundings in bewilderment, uncertain whether they'd dreamed the entire night's horrors. Nathan watched calmly as the three ninjas' faces went pale. In an instant, they all drew kunai and dropped into a tight triangular guard, eyes sweeping the tree line for any sign of danger. Their swift reaction proved they'd been well trained, but only a jonin could inspire that kind of vigilance. Adopting the same steady tone he'd heard from Mizutani Yuichi, Nathan called out, "All right, the enemy's retreated. You can relax." At his words, the three lowered their blades, though each remained on edge, scanning the shadows as if expecting another ambush at any moment. Ignoring their lingering tension, Nathan tilted his head skyward. "It's getting late. Let's pick up the pace and head back to the village." There was no argument. With their attackers gone, the ninjas dared not challenge the voice of authority. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison, sheathing their kunai and falling in line behind him. Nathan offered a brief nod of approval and strode confidently down the narrow forest path, leading his team back toward home as dusk settled around them. Behind him, the three genin exchanged quick glances before slipping into a tight defensive formation, one in front, two at his back. You might wonder why Nathan didn't simply eliminate them and return to Kirigakure alone. The answer was straightforward. That would only invite trouble. Their assignment was a D-rank mission, clearing out mountain bandits, not a shinobi-on-shinobi operation. If all three genin were found dead at the hands of a lone jonin on such a low-level task, Kirigakure's Anbu would open an immediate inquiry, and Nathan still needed to pursue rumors of the Seven Tails in Takigakure. Drawing Anbu's scrutiny now would derail everything. By keeping the genin alive, he maintained plausible deniability and avoided unwanted attention from his own village's covert forces. Besides, these three were the ones most familiar with his behavior and fighting style. In a twisted way, they served as his best early warning system, proof that sometimes survival meant letting your enemies live. Nathan kept his composure as he walked alongside the three Takigakure genin. If he could maintain his disguise in front of them, no one else would ever suspect his true identity. So far, his transformations had been flawless, and the genin had asked almost nothing, their conversation kept to a minimum. That silence only bolstered Nathan's confidence as they pressed on toward the hidden village. By dusk, they reached the roaring waterfall that guarded Takigakure. Behind that wall of water lay the cave entrance. Under the cascade's pounding torrent, Nathan and the three genin slipped inside. Dozens of silent ninja sentries lined the cavern's rim, but a quick, respectful nod from Nathan earned them passage. They hurried to the heart of the cavern, where a vast underground lake stretched out before them. This was the gateway to the true village. Together, they plunged beneath the surface into the chilly water. An underwater tunnel snaked ahead, its rocky walls studded with faintly glowing moss. One by one, they passed through multiple security checkpoints, each guarded by vigilant shinobi, without raising an alarm. Finally, breaking through the tunnel's end, Nathan emerged into the secret heart of Takigakure village. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. After the three genin departed, Nathan made his way to the mission office to turn in his report. It was his first time there, but thanks to the memories he'd accessed from Mizutani Yuichi, he navigated the formalities without a hitch. Since it was only a D-rank mission, the clerks hardly looked over his paperwork before stamping it approved. Within minutes, the handover was complete. Nathan returned to his quarters and settled in to rest and to plan his next move. He was fairly certain no one was targeting him specifically, but a cautious shinobi never let his guard down. Chapter 685, a sudden mission. 3 days had come and gone in the blink of an eye. At dawn, Nathan slipped away from Takigakure under the pretense of training his 3 genin. In truth, he'd spent every waking hour meticulously tracking the Seven Tails' status. His hunch was confirmed. The beast had not yet been sealed into Fu's body and remained an independent entity, the exact window of opportunity he needed. Nathan knew this period of freedom was fleeting. Piecing together scattered rumors and village council chatter, he was confident that Takigakure's leadership would finalize the sealing ritual within a week. Once the Seven Tails was bound to Fu, it would lose all autonomy, and Nathan's chance of intervening would vanish. He'd planned to strike later, but now he realized he had to move sooner. Fortunately, his preparations were nearly complete. He could adjust his timetable and act ahead of schedule. First, though, he needed to relay the intelligence back to his allies. Emerging from the roaring waterfall outside Takigakure's borders, Nathan led his 3 genin companions through the mist, ready to return with news and to set into motion the mission that would decide the fate of the Seven Tails. Nathan scanned the 3 Takigakure genin standing before him and said in a calm voice, "Follow me." Without waiting for a reply, he spun on his heel and dashed into the forest's depths. The genin, unwilling to fall behind, scrambled after him through the underbrush. They pressed on for nearly an hour, leaping over fallen logs and ducking under low-hanging branches, until they burst into a quiet, uninhabited mountain clearing. Nathan came to a halt and turned, watching as the 3 young ninjas staggered to a stop beside him, chests heaving. When their labored breathing finally slowed, Nathan adopted the clipped, authoritative tone of his mentor, Mizutani Yuichi. "Your endurance is still wanting," he said. "You'll need to focus on building your stamina from here on out." "Yes, teacher," they replied in unison, voices firm despite their fatigue. Nathan allowed himself a small nod of approval, satisfied by their quick, respectful response. Nathan gave a curt nod. "I'll scout the nearby area. You 3 rest and recover your strength." "Yes, teacher." The trio settled to the ground, controlled their breathing, and began restoring their energy. Once they were absorbed in their recovery, Nathan vanished in a swirl of shadows. After a dozen steady breaths, he materialized atop a large tree not far from them. He took a careful survey of the surroundings, then lifted his hand to his forehead. With a subtle motion, he dispelled the guardian seal, unleashing his Byakugan. His recent physical transformation had raised his constitution to 22, fully awakening the Byakugan and merging it with his shadow clones, much like his Sharingan before. That synergy was precisely why Nathan felt confident sending a clone into Takigakure village to pinpoint the Seven Tails. In a settlement this vast, searching bit by bit might have allowed the beast to go berserk before he ever found it. Nathan pushed aside his scattered thoughts and refocused his mind, activating his Byakugan to survey the area. After confirming there was no one within a kilometer, he deactivated the dojutsu and moved without hesitation. He formed a series of swift hand seals, then slapped the nearby tree trunk. Instantly, a dense network of inky black lines etched itself into the bark, essentially a miniature sealing array. In truth, this pattern was his version of the Flying Thunder God mark, the chakra seal required to perform the Flying Thunder God technique. But because his mastery was still raw, the symbol had turned out far more intricate than the simple emblems crafted by Senju Tobirama or Namikaze Minato. Their mastery let them reduce the teleportation tag to a basic shape and a single line of text. Nathan, however, was confident that with enough practice, he would one day streamline his own design. For now, this complicated mark would have to suffice. Nathan R. attracted his hand and examined the sealing mark one last time. Satisfied that everything was perfect, he unleashed the shadow clone technique. Bang! A swirl of chakra-charged smoke billowed out, and then the figure that had been perched on the branch simply vanished. On the same southern island in the Land of Fire, Nathan was absorbed in refining his palm immortal technique when suddenly his expression went stone cold. He froze mid-gesture and closed his eyes. Seconds stretched on. Behind his closed lids, his pupils darted frantically and beads of sweat formed on his brow. His entire being crackled with alertness, because in that moment he was downloading the memories of every shadow clone he had sent to infiltrate Takigakure village. Each clone had existed only briefly, yet their combined experiences spanned days. That relentless flood of recollection bore down on him with crushing intensity. Nathan's mental strength held firm. He was used to the overwhelming flood of information into his mind, so he managed to endure. 30 minutes later, he finally opened his eyes. A thoughtful gleam crossed his face. Thanks to the memories retained by his shadow clone, he now had a far more detailed picture of the situation in Takigakure village. Drawing on everything the clone had observed, he sketched out a rough plan for his next move. He still needed to iron out the details, of course, but as anyone who deals in strategy knows, events seldom unfold exactly the way you intend. Plans rarely keep up with reality. Before he could ponder further, a sharp cry cut through the stillness, jolting him to attention. Nathan looked up to find a hand-trained herald eagle wheeling overhead, as if searching for someone. After a moment, the bird honed in on its mark, then swooped down straight toward him. A frown creased Nathan's brow. An inexplicable sense of dread settled in his chest. Still, he gathered himself and extended his arm, letting the eagle alight on his gloved fist. Nathan barely registered the eagle's sharp cry before it planted its right talon on the edge of his desk, revealing a small wooden message box. Without hesitation, he pried it open and retrieved the neatly folded scroll inside. Unfurling the parchment, he read its single-lined command: "Return to the village at once. There is a mission awaiting you." "A mission?" Nathan whispered, his brow tightening as a cold knot of unease settled in his gut. As a seasoned shinobi of the Uchiha clan, he rarely bothered with the routine, low-paying jobs that kept most civilian ninja busy. In fact, he hadn't set foot in the mission bureau for months. Every waking hour had been devoted to relentless training. Yet this summons felt different. The village only dispatched direct orders like this when something serious was afoot. Whatever awaited him back home, it clearly couldn't be ignored or refused. Nathan tucked the scroll into his belt, made a silent vow to leave at first light, and steeled himself for whatever challenge lay ahead. Nathan dissolved the nearby practice clone and absorbed its experiences. Having integrated his recent training, he formed a single-handed seal and activated the shadow clone technique, producing one more copy of himself. Nathan studied the duplicate for a moment, then issued a firm command: "I want you to infiltrate Takigakure village. Stay hidden, and don't make any sudden moves." The clone gave a crisp nod and closed its eyes. Moments later, it vanished. Nathan closed his own eyes in concentration and sensed the telltale signature of the Flying Thunder God technique. As he'd suspected, the clone had teleported itself to a forest just beyond the outskirts of Takigakure. This was the true advantage of the Flying Thunder God technique. Although Nathan's mastery of it was still imperfect, and its utility somewhat limited, it was already transforming the scope of what he could achieve. With a single strike, he could send his shadow clones far and wide, gathering intelligence or sowing confusion without exposing himself to danger. And that subtle edge might prove decisive in the days to come. Nathan watched as his shadow clone disappeared into the distance, then finally allowed himself to move. He stowed his equipment with practiced efficiency, summoned Wind Style, Wind Wings, and the Chakra Feather Cloak, and soared toward Konoha village. In truth, he had already seated Flying Thunder God teleportation tags outside the village gates and at his own home, ready to whisk him away in an instant. But Nathan refused to use them unless absolutely necessary. The Flying Thunder God technique was an S-rank forbidden jutsu, cataloged in the Book of Seals, and he'd never acquired it through official channels. Any careless activation would invite scrutiny. Almost everyone who knew he was hunting down the secrets of the Root organization would immediately piece together his trail if he teleported. A few might genuinely remain oblivious, or choose to feign ignorance, but Nathan didn't want to take that chance. Better to rely on his wings and cloak than risk alerting the very people he was trying to outmaneuver. With that resolve, he lifted higher on the wind currents and set his course for the hidden leaf. Nathan knew he still needed to maintain appearances. Even though he had mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, he couldn't flaunt it carelessly, and it was far too valuable to reveal unless absolutely necessary. With that in mind, he banished the thought and summoned his wind wings, accelerating toward Konoha village in a blur of air and chakra. More than 30 minutes later, Nathan hovered just outside the village walls. He dispelled his wind wings and let the chakra feather cloak dissolve back into his body. With a light step, he landed on the dusty road leading into Konoha, drawing startled glances from the patrols nearby. Ignoring their curiosity, he passed confidently through the gate and made his way into the heart of the village. Rather than heading straight for the Hokage's office, Nathan went instead to the Uchiha compound. The summons had come from Uchiha Fugaku himself, and before making any plans, Nathan intended to learn every detail of the situation firsthand. The Uchiha estate lay silent as he approached, but through the lattice windows of the main manor, he saw Fugaku standing at the ready. The older man's expression was grave, but there was no mistaking the relief in his eyes when he spotted Nathan entering the courtyard. Nathan stepped forward, prepared to hear the story in full. Nathan settled into the low-slung chair opposite Uchiha Fugaku, already bracing himself for answers. Fugaku offered a curt nod, then began. Not long ago, the Cloud Village at the front lines ramped up their attacks. They even punched a hole through Konoha's defenses and pressed all the way to the border of the Land of Fire. Our frontline shinobi threw everything they had into driving them back, but at a terrible cost. Casualties mounted so fast our lines were perilously thin. They feared they couldn't hold if the Cloud forces struck again, so they sent an urgent plea for reinforcements. Nathan leaned forward, brows knitted. But Konoha was already stretched thin dealing with internal unrest, Fugaku continued. Most of our best ninja were tied up elsewhere. We simply didn't have the numbers to spare. So what did the leadership decide? Nathan asked. Fugaku's eyes darkened. When you can't send more bodies, you send quality. The council approached the Hokage, Minato Namikaze himself, and proposed one of our seasoned operatives, you. Your record in the Third Great Ninja War speaks for itself, and you happen to be between assignments. Nathan felt a flicker of pride mixed with frustration. Minato personally requested me? Indeed, Fugaku said. Relations between the Uchiha clan and the village leadership are unusually cordial now. When Minato made the call, I had no reservations. You were recalled immediately and ordered to the front. Silence settled between them as Nathan absorbed the truth. The battle lines had been drawn without his knowledge, and now he was to be thrown into the fray once more, this time as the village's ace in the hole. After Uchiha Fugaku finished explaining the situation, Nathan fell silent for a long moment. So, he finally said, shaking his head, when do we move out? And I'm the only one going? Seeing that Nathan hadn't flat-out refused, Fugaku let out a quiet breath of relief. He'd been half expecting Nathan to turn him down. After all, Nathan hated unnecessary trouble, and there was already tension between him and Danzo. But Nathan didn't protest. Of course, if Nathan knew what was really on Fugaku's mind, he'd probably laugh. He wasn't being noble or self-sacrificing. He simply didn't think the Kumogakure's unusual frontline activity was worth worrying over. With his current strength, even the full AB unit couldn't pose a real threat, and without any fear for his own life, no situation ever seemed too bad. Nathan replayed the events in his mind. In his past life's recollection, Kumogakure had never formally signed a truce with Konoha, but they also hadn't launched any incursions into the Land of Fire until a year or two later. That meant the sudden surge of Cloud Village activity now didn't automatically signal an all-out invasion. Instead, he suspected, this was a calculated probe designed to test Minato Namikaze's resolve. Konoha had only just welcomed Minato as the fourth Hokage, and a skirmish on the borders was almost inevitable. If Nathan's hunch was right, these first maneuvers by Kumogakure would only be the opening gambit. Before long, the other hidden villages would follow suit. They might not be as brazen as the Cloud Village, but they would certainly dispatch small teams to infiltrate Fire Country and gather intelligence. Judging by history, as laid out in those early volumes, Konoha's Anbu would soon be working overtime to counter these covert operations. Could this string of border probes become the secret war that propels Kakashi into renown? Only time would tell. The more Nathan thought it over, the more it made sense. Just days ago, he'd caught sight of Kakashi wearing an Anbu uniform. If the Anbu were to move in secret, they'd almost certainly throw themselves into the fight first. They've never been ones to hesitate at a dangerous mission, and in doing so they'd secure all the credit before anyone else even had a chance. Nathan shook his head, squashing down every wild theory. He focused instead on Uchiha Fugaku's next words. Your task force will total 100 shinobi, 10 jonin, 60 chunin, and 30 genin, and you'll be their captain. Understood, Nathan said after a moment's thought. Fugaku went on to outline the team's makeup in greater detail. There were very few conscripted or civilian ninjas among them. Almost everyone came from established shinobi families. These were proven warriors, not paper tigers. Each member could be counted on to perform under pressure. Nathan felt a swell of confidence. 100 elite fighters under his command was more than enough to get the job done. Nathan left Uchiha Fugaku's estate as soon as their meeting ended. He hurried home to pack a change of clothes and a few essential tools, sealing them all inside a summoning scroll. Without pausing, he sprinted toward the Hokage's office. This was Nathan's first time meeting Minato Namikaze in person. Pressed for time, Minato laid out the latest frontline intelligence, enemy troop movements, battlefield conditions, and critical vulnerabilities, then dismissed him to join the deployment. Nathan thanked him with a curt nod and wasted no time. Below the Hokage's tower, Nathan found the strike team already assembled. He ran a quick head count, 19 shinobi in all, and satisfied that everyone was present, gave the order to move out. Using the flying Raijin technique, the squad covered ground at astonishing speed. In under 3 days, they touched down in the Land of Fields, northeast of the Land of Fire. Here, the shinobi of Konoha were locked in fierce combat with forces from the Hidden Cloud village. Reports had been grim. The enemy's advance was relentless, and conventional defenses were failing. It was a testament to the frontline commander's foresight that Konoha had called in reinforcements. Alone, their ranks were too thin to repulse the Cloud's assault. Now, with Nathan and his team arrived, the tide of battle, and perhaps the fate of the Land of Fire, still hung in the balance. Thanks to his immediate call for help, Nathan and the others arrived just in time and prevented even greater losses. Chapter 687, Understanding the Situation and Preparing to Set Off. Nathan stepped into the forward camp's headquarters and paused at the sight before him. Standing at the center of the tent was a man he'd never met. This must be the battlefield's commanding officer. From the dossier Bofeng Shuiman had provided, Nathan knew he was looking at Nara Fufeng, scion of the famed Nara clan. Like his ninja cousins, Fufeng had inherited the clan's legendary intellect and uncanny tactical instincts, which was precisely why he'd been tapped to oversee operations here. Without pausing for formalities, Nathan met the commander's gaze and said, "Captain Nara, could you bring me up to speed on the current situation? And please let me know what you need me to handle." For a heartbeat, Nara Fufeng seemed taken aback by the newcomer's blunt directness. Then, gathering himself, he nodded, stepped forward, and unfurled a large map across the table. "Very well," he replied crisply. "Though Bofeng Shuiman has already given you an overview, I'll fill in the gaps. First-hand intelligence is always more reliable." As Fufeng began outlining enemy movements and friendly dispositions, Nathan leaned in, absorbing every detail. He understood that in the chaos of the front line, no report could replace a personal briefing. With the picture finally clear, he prepared himself for the orders that would send him into the heart of the conflict. Nathan ran a hand through his hair and let out a low groan. "So you want us to split our forces into 2 detachments, one to hold the northern approach and one for the south?" Captain Nara shook his head. "Not quite. We need 3 lines of defense, not 2. In addition to the north and south flanks, there's a third threat coming through Union Village." "Union Village?" Nathan frowned. "What are they planning there?" Nara stepped over to the sand table and pointed at a cluster of rugged mountains and dense forest. "Our scouts have reported that enemy commanders are dispatching an elite detachment through this corridor. Their goal is to sneak behind our lines, link up with the main force, and smash through our defenses in a coordinated assault." Nathan studied the map, brows knitting. He didn't press for the source of Nara's intelligence. Captain Nara was never one to spread rumors. If he'd gone to the trouble of adjusting the entire defense plan, there had to be solid proof. And that meant Union Village wasn't just a diversion. It was the key to the enemy's true strategy. Nathan peered intently at the sand table before him, tracing the ridges and valleys of the miniature mountain forest. Even without any written records of previous expeditions here, he knew instinctively that this terrain was far from safe. After all, Nara Fufeng had deliberately chosen these mountains as the frontier of their defense line. Nara Fufeng caught the tension in Nathan's eyes and offered a brief explanation. "You're right to be wary. This region teems with mutant beasts, and that's only half the danger. It's crawling with elaborate traps set by poisonous insects." "Traps?" Nathan echoed, surprise edging his voice. He had no trouble accepting the presence of mutant creatures. After all, the ninja realm was a world of fabled spirit beasts and uncanny predators. But insect-laid snare lines? He paused, picturing venomous arachnids weaving deadly webs across hidden clearings. They actually go to the trouble of rigging traps down here? Seeing his confusion, Nara Fufeng smiled wryly. "Worse," he said. "These insects don't just bite or sting. They construct intricate pits and ambush points that can bring down a seasoned warrior in seconds." As the full extent of the threat sank in, Nathan realized he'd seriously underestimated the challenges ahead. What he'd assumed was mere overgrowth was, in fact, a carefully orchestrated gauntlet of living hazards, a reality that would test every ounce of his skill and courage. Nara Fufeng leaned forward and explained the true nature of the traps Nathan was about to face. These weren't impale hidden pits or hastily drawn seals. They were the same deadly obstacles Shinobi had battled over the last 2 years and more. Countless teams had tried to neutralize them, and nearly all had failed. The ninjas had woven potent jutsu and sealing spells into each device, often incorporating strange bioengineered creatures as living guardians. Left undisturbed, the traps only grew more lethal with time. Coupled with the ravine's unforgiving terrain, the entire region had earned its reputation as an impenetrable barrier. Now, under orders from the village elders, Fufeng was to lead a squad in defense of the ravine, to stop an advancing enemy before they could break through. Nathan, however, barely raised an eyebrow. With his current abilities, surviving a few overgrown snare traps was child's play. He gave a short, amused sigh and met Fufeng's anxious gaze. "All right," he said. "How many of them are there, and what kind of strength are we talking about?" At that question, Fufeng felt a sudden lift of tension. Truth be told, the mission itself was well within their capabilities, but facing Nathan's calm confidence was another matter entirely. Deep down, he'd much rather contend with a legion of deadly traps than the unpredictable will of the young shinobi standing before him. Fortunately, the council raised no objections, and the mission was approved at once. Nathan let out a quiet sigh. Perhaps the clan's intelligence had exaggerated, and facing an Uchiha prodigy wasn't quite the impossible challenge everyone feared. Composing himself, Nara Fufeng relayed the spy's latest report. Union Village will deploy 12 squads, organized into 3 columns of 4 teams each. Each column will advance along a different route. We don't yet know their exact objectives. Nathan frowned. And their strength? All squads are at full capacity, Fufeng replied evenly. Every team is led by a ninja-level master. Captains and vice-captains alike are elite shinobi. No wiggle room? Nathan pressed. None whatsoever, Fufeng confirmed. Nathan let out a low groan. Nathan tapped his fingers on the edge of the table, eyes fixed on the flickering map display. Finally, he asked, "When are they supposed to move out?" Nara Fufeng checked his watch and frowned. "According to our last report, they should have been gone 2 hours ago." Nathan's chest tightened. Time was running out faster than he'd realized. He drew in a steadying breath. "All right, no more delays. I'll lead my squad out immediately. Keep your comms open. If you pick up anything, notify me at once." He straightened his jacket and started for the door. "Wait!" Fufeng's voice stopped him in his tracks. Nathan turned, brow raised. "Yes? How many men will you take, and which route will you follow?" Fufeng asked. Nathan stepped back to the center of the room, where a scale model of the alpine forest lay spread across a sand-colored tabletop. He tapped a narrow valley trail winding through the trees. "A single squad is enough, and since we don't know their exact path, we'll go through the middle pass. It offers the best cover and gives us the greatest chance to intercept or shadow them." He met Fufeng's eyes decisively. "I'll keep you updated on their movements. If anything changes, I'll report in immediately." With a crisp nod, Nathan turned and left the command post to gather his men, the echo of his boots a reminder that there was no time to waste. "Once we've confirmed their position, I'll lead the assault team to take them out. I leave the defensive line in your hands." With that, Nathan strode from the command tent without another word, already gesturing to his men to follow. Across the canvas walls, Nara Fufeng raised his hand, as if to call Nathan back, then let it fall. The younger man's tone had sounded arrogant, but considering Nathan's track record and their aerial superiority, this plan might indeed be the most effective. "What a bold move," Fufeng muttered, watching Nathan's retreating form. Nathan didn't hear him, and if he had, he would have just sneered. That boldness Fufeng envied came from nothing more than absolute confidence in his own strength. In reality, Nathan hadn't overthought this at all. As the saying goes, when you're powerful enough, every choice you make looks flawless. Chapter 688, Discovery. An hour later, deep within the ghost-weeping forest, Nathan's squad pressed onward with the utmost vigilance. The fabled ghost-weeping forest, its dense, frost-kissed pines, once merely an icon on Nathan's sand table, had swiftly lived up to its fearsome reputation. In that short span, the team had repelled 5 surprise attacks by venomous insects and wild creatures, and navigated through both active and abandoned booby traps. Thanks to Nathan's careful selection, every shinobi in the detachment held at least chunin rank, and each of the 4 squad captains was a seasoned jonin. As a result, while battered, they claimed no non-combat losses. Time ticked on in heavy silence, broken only by the crunch of brittle undergrowth. Then, without warning, a jonin at the point raised his right arm in a silent halt. In unison, the squad froze and slid out their kunai, shuriken, and other ninja tools, eyes scanning the gloom, but nothing stirred. The lead jonin, his dark hair tied back in a tight topknot, brought his palms together, closed his normal eyes, and activated the pale, featureless gaze of the Byakugan. Subtle veins blossomed around his temples as he wove chakra through the Hyuga clan's special vision, sweeping the forest in a complete circle. Every shinobi watched, recognizing in that soft white glow the unmistakable power of the Hyuga's hidden artillery. A tense heartbeat passed. Then, with eyes still glowing, the jonin whispered, "There's movement ahead." 2 distinct chakra signatures, concealed but very close. Nolan took a steadying breath, readied his kunai, and signaled forward. The hunt was on. Nathan signaled the squad to halt and calmly took in his surroundings, easing the tension that had built up among them. He watched the veteran Hyuga shinobi ahead, the one he'd chosen to lead their advance, without saying a word. Unlike Nathan's own Byakugan, which was unstable and risky to expose, this elder's jujutsu was fully mastered and perfect for reconnaissance. After a moment, the Hyuga activated his Byakugan, scanning every detail within a 1-kilometer radius. Satisfied with the information, he nodded and led the team deeper into the forest. Thanks to his precise vision, they cut straight through dense undergrowth and tangled branches, covering ground they'd otherwise have struggled to navigate. 30 minutes later, Nathan hung back from the main group. He was certain they were nearing the Hidden Cloud Village's perimeter. With a quiet directive for the others to continue, he activated 2 wind-style techniques in tandem, wind wings and the chakra feather robe, and lifted off. Within seconds, he was hovering 40 feet above the treetops, scanning for any sign of their target. Everyone watched Nathan's retreating figure, their footsteps faltering for a moment before the Hyuga clan ninja leader rallied them back to the original plan. They all understood Nathan's strategy: ascend above the ghost-crying forest, pick out any signs of the hidden cloud shinobi, and then strike each cloud team in turn. Yet even Nathan admitted that spotting enemy shinobi through that living ceiling of leaves wouldn't be easy, and the others shared his unease. What they didn't know was that Nathan possessed the Byakugan. To him, the forest canopy offered no refuge. With a single burst of flying ninjutsu, he would rise above the treetops and survey the undergrowth below as clearly as glass, every branch, every shadow, every hidden glimmer of movement. It would take him hardly any time to scan the entire forest. Once his Byakugan was in play, no cloud ninja could slip past undetected. In truth, there was no forest dense enough to hide from him. Nathan didn't want to give away too much. If he did, His presence alone could tip off the Cloud Ninja infiltration team as soon as he and his companions entered the forest. But time was running out, and this standoff had dragged on for no good reason. Resolving to end it, Nathan raised a hand in a sealing gesture. He released the Guardian seal at the center of his brow, his eyes turning milky white, and then launched himself into the air above the forest canopy. His mental bandwidth could only process information so quickly. He couldn't sustain full-speed flight and scan at the same time, but it wasn't a problem. He didn't need to comb every inch of the woods. Nara Fufeng had just sent word that, although the infiltration team's exact route remained uncertain, scouts had narrowed it down to 3 likely paths. Nathan simply floated from one corridor of trees to the next, inspecting each in turn. It required little effort. 15 minutes later, after methodically checking all 3 possible routes, he finally spotted something. Mid-air, Nathan paused, his senses sharpening as he locked onto the anomaly before him. Nathan's pale eyes swept the forest ahead, where a squad of over a dozen hidden cloud shinobi advanced with measured caution. Their village insignias made their allegiance unmistakable, and the only plausible explanation for their presence this deep in enemy territory was that they were an infiltration team. Reading their chakra signatures confirmed his suspicion. They were strong, elite operatives. Yet Nathan held his position, refusing to act on impulse. It wasn't that he feared defeat. He knew that even a squad of mid-level Chunin and Jonin posed no mortal threat to him in his current state. Rather, he hadn't yet located the other 2 cloud infiltration units, and striking too soon would introduce far too many uncertainties. More importantly, any overt move could reveal his hand, and he intended to remain hidden for as long as possible. Nathan hadn't forgotten about the recent incident with Danzo. If he made too much of a show of himself now, he'd only draw unwanted attention. Besides, this wasn't his mission to lead. He needed to let the others have their turn. Better to confirm the positions of the other 2 Cloud Ninja infiltration teams before tipping off his own men. With that in mind, he veered off, silently slipping away in another direction at high speed. Down below, a Cloud Ninja patrol moved cautiously through the dense forest. Suddenly, one of them froze in his tracks. The others, sensing his hesitation, tensed immediately. Seconds passed without a sound. Finally, one of them cleared his throat and addressed the still figure. "Is something wrong, Ijizi?" Ijizi, the only woman in the unit, lowered her chakra-based senses and shook her head. "It's nothing concrete, but a moment ago, I felt as if someone was watching us." Her comrades exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew Ijizi's reputation. Although she wasn't the strongest in hand-to-hand combat, her sensory abilities were unmatched. If she'd sensed an intruder, there was no dismissing it as mere nerves. The forest fell silent once more as they took up their weapons, prepared for whatever lay hidden in the shadows. Nathan's pulse quickened as he crouched behind the fallen log. "What did you see?" he whispered. Jing Zizi shook her head, brow furrowed. "Nothing solid, just a fleeting impression that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. It could have been an illusion." The senior ninja of the Union squad frowned. He didn't believe it was mere trickery, yet Jing Zizi had turned up nothing. The mission was too important for uncertainty. "Very well," he said with a tight sigh. "We'll proceed, but stay alert." With that, he signaled the team to advance, every footstep measured and cautious. Unbeknownst to Nathan, his own clandestine surveillance had put the Union shinobi on edge. Their heightened vigilance would soon compromise the ambush he had been counting on. Even if he knew, he wouldn't have cared. To Nathan, absolute strength rendered all schemes futile. No matter how carefully one planned, true power made such precautions meaningless, and at most cost a little extra chakra to overcome. Chapter 689, Ambush and Action. Keeping a safe distance from Jingjizi and the others, Nathan wasted no time. He set off to locate the other 2 Union infiltration squads, exactly as they had planned. Whether it was instinct or simply the benefit of his earlier scouting, he managed to avoid every dead end, and within minutes he had pinpointed both squads' positions. Just as Nara Fufeng's intelligence had warned, Union Village had dispatched 3 elite teams. Every shinobi in those units was at least genin level, and each squad was led by a captain of the same rank. Had they carried out their mission successfully, the destruction would have been catastrophic. Fortunately, that threat no longer existed. Satisfied, Nathan cast a quick glance toward the woods where the third squad was advancing with extreme caution. Then, without hesitating, he spun on his heel and flew straight back to his own team. Since there was no longer any need to search, his return was swift. As he landed, his comrades came to an immediate halt. Hyuga, who was leading the vanguard, stepped forward. "Captain, did you find anything?" he asked bluntly. Nathan nodded. "I located both of the first two squads. They're neutralized. The third team is still on the move, creeping through the tree line about 100 meters to the northwest." He surveyed the forest's edge, then addressed the group. "Get into position. We'll set up an ambush and finish this before they can regroup." With clear orders, the team fell into formation, weapons ready. The final confrontation was about to begin. When the others learned that the three young ninja squad's positions had been pinpointed, every face in the command tent went slack with shock, then swiftly hardened into surprise. Securing the enemy's location first meant an almost guaranteed upper hand, and yet here they were, reeling at how Nathan had pulled it off so quickly. It wasn't that they doubted him. As their field commander, he had nothing to gain by fabricating such a story. What puzzled them was his method. Sure, his mastery of airborne ninjutsu gave him certain advantages, but even that skill alone shouldn't have let him find all three hidden squads in the tangled depths of the ghost-weeping forest, and certainly not in the time he'd claimed. Still, a report is a report. Nathan had arrived, surveyed the terrain, and returned with precise coordinates. There was no question about the result. Thankfully, the other shinobi were as pragmatic as they were disciplined. They bit back their curiosity and accepted his word without demanding every detail. In a world shrouded by secret techniques and concealed motives, pressing too hard only risked breaching unspoken boundaries and offending a comrade whose talents they'd come to respect. Everyone moved on without another word and turned to the next operation. In truth, there wasn't much to debate. 1. Locate the nearest Yunren squad. 2. Use our intelligence advantage to catch them off guard and force them to split their forces. 3. Watch how they react, then launch our follow-up attack. It was the most efficient plan, and within minutes everyone had agreed. With the tactical briefing concluded, they sprang into action. Their first objective was the renowned Yunren Vanguard unit. Veterans Nathan had personally scouted during his earlier infiltration. He'd mapped their positions both from a distance and up close, so striking them now made perfect sense. This time, Nathan didn't venture off on his own. He joined the Nico clan's reconnaissance team, climbed into the upper highlands, and set off toward their designated rendezvous point. Meanwhile, on the other side, Nathan and his team pushed through the dense undergrowth, slipping past ferocious beasts' lairs and swarms of venomous insects. They disarmed hidden traps as they steadily advanced toward the far edge of the ghost forest. Thanks to Jingjizi's earlier warning, every shinobi kept their weapons at the ready. Any rustle of wind or shifting leaf warranted an immediate halt and inspection. Inevitably, their progress was slower than hoped, lengthening the wait for Nathan's ambush. Still, Nathan's squad was composed entirely of seasoned elites, each one handpicked for skill and absolute trust in his leadership. Had they been any less capable, disaster might have followed. Their rigorous training and discipline, however, held fast. After what felt like an eternity, the Rengxiang clan scouts, charged with monitoring the perimeter, suddenly signaled, "Everyone, get ready, the target's here." In unison, the dozen operatives drew their kunai and fixed their gaze on the approaching Hyuga party. Nathan exchanged a glance with Jingjizi and quietly asked, "Where is he?" "Distance," Nathan called out. "About 1 minute away, roughly 900 meters," came the response from the Hyuga clan's forward watch. Nathan turned to the dozen cadets assembled before him. "Teams 1 and 2, move in and set up an ambush on the left flank." "Yes, Captain." The leaders of Teams 1 and 2 replied together, rallying their squads and darting off into the cover. Nathan then faced Teams 3 and 4. "You two, take the right side." "Understood," came their swift acknowledgments, and they disappeared into the trees on the opposite flank. In moments, only Nathan and the Hyuga reserve remained at the forefront of the clearing. He scanned the tree line beyond. When the enemy approaches, I'll lead the advance. Stay alert. Watch every direction. Once the other two cloud squads draw near, signal me at once. Nathan spoke quietly but firmly. Although the three Cloud Ninja teams were advancing in separate groups, they kept close enough to offer each other swift support, especially now as they approached the dreaded ghost-crying forest. To ensure they wouldn't be caught off guard, he'd assigned a senior Hyuga clansman to keep watch on their surroundings. Understood, the Hyuga ninja replied promptly. I'll alert you the moment I see anything. Nathan nodded, satisfied. Then the forest settled into an eerie stillness. Minutes ticked by without a sound, until the Hyuga clansman's soft voice broke the hush. They're coming. Nathan's head snapped toward the 1 o'clock position. In an instant, he activated his Sharingan. 3 fiery Magatama swirled into place in each pupil, sharpening every detail before his eyes. The enemy was drawing near, and now he was ready. Though the Sharingan doesn't grant the all-seeing vision of the Byakugan, its keen insight let Nathan pick out the squad of Kumo Shinobi through a gap in the trees. He recognized Izizi and the others he'd tangled with before. At first, relief washed over him. They were blindly marching into his trap. But then he caught the glint of specialized ninja tools in their hands and the taut caution in their movements. His brow creased. These shinobi were far too alert. In an instant, the group halted and, with military precision, formed a tight defensive formation. Damn it, someone's tipped them off, Nathan muttered, though he couldn't tell what had betrayed his ambush. He knew he had only seconds to act. With a flick of his wrist, he loosed a razor-sharp shuriken from his sleeve. As it whistled toward the enemy line, he snapped off a rapid hand seal and unleashed his A-rank ninjutsu, the shuriken shadow clone technique. In the blink of an eye, the lone shuriken split into 2, then 4, then 8, until the sky above the Cloud Ninja team teemed with their spinning shadows, all hurtling toward them at once. Chapter 690. Quick Decision. Watch out! A middle-aged jonin from the Cloud Ninja squad barked the warning as hundreds of shurikens suddenly rained down through the trees. The Cloud Ninjas, already on high alert, sprang into action. Blades flashed, bodies twisted. Each warrior either deflected or evaded the deadly projectiles with practiced precision. They formed their tight, defensive formation and held fast against Nathan's shuriken shadow clone technique. Nathan, formerly known as Qingming, had honed this technique to its level 8 peak, standing just a hair's breadth from level 9 perfection. Yet at this distance, his control slipped, and his shurikens scattered rather than homing in on individual targets. The Cloud Ninja shield wall remained unbroken. Nathan's brow creased. He stamped the earth with one foot, channeling chakra into the flash body technique. In an instant, his form blurred, leaving behind only a wavering shadow as he closed the gap to the Cloud Ninja unit in a heartbeat. Nathan narrowed his eyes the moment Izizi's warning rang out. Watch out! Someone's coming! Without hesitation, several of the senior Cloud Ninja sprang into action. They formed tight seals with their fingers, locked onto Nathan, and launched kunai in unison. Then the rest followed suit, unleashing a shower of steel daggers that rained down on him like deadly hail. Nathan's expression didn't waver. He planted his feet, raised a hand to form a seal, and intoned the earth-shaking incantation. Earth style, earth flow wall. With a thunderous roar, a 10-meter-long, 3-meter-high barrier of compacted earth shot up from the ground, intercepting the rain of kunai and clattering their blades harmlessly aside. But he wasn't about to rest on his defense. Seizing the momentary confusion among the Cloud Ninja, Nathan slipped around the edge of his own earthen wall. He surged forward, closing the distance in a blur of movement. As he ran, his fingers wove another swift seal. Fire style, Phoenix Fire technique. Flames ignited at his fingertips, coalescing into a blazing vortex as Nathan charged into the heart of the Cloud Ninja formation. Without warning, Nathan unleashed a barrage of fireballs from his mouth, each blazing orb bursting forth like the seed pods of a phoenix flower, straight at the Cloud Ninja formation. Overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the attack, the enemy shinobi scattered, trying desperately to dodge the incoming projectiles. Deep within Nathan's eyes, the 3 Magatama of his Sharingan spun in a blur, pinpointing 3 clusters of Cloud Ninja. With a swift series of hand seals, he channeled chakra into a single devastating technique, fire style, Great Dragon Fire Technique. A roar of flame erupted from his lips, coalescing into 3 massive, serpentine dragons that lunged at each targeted group. At the first location, a quick-thinking ninja countered with water escape jutsu, extinguishing the dragon's blaze just in time. But the other 2 groups weren't so fortunate. The fire dragons tore through their ranks, scattering them in chaos. With their comrades dispersed and their once formidable formation broken, the Cloud Ninja's defenses collapsed. Seizing the moment, hidden Konoha shinobi burst from ambush positions on both flanks, charging into the disoriented enemy lines and turning the tide of battle in a heartbeat. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The 2 sides clashed at once. On the Cloud Village's team, there were 17 shinobi, 1 team leader, 4 squad leaders, and 12 squad members. The leader and all 4 squad commanders were Jonin, or Special Jonin, while the 12 others held Chunin rank. Opposing them, Konoha had an identical lineup, 4 Jonin captains plus Nathan, also a Jonin, and 12 Chunin. 17 versus 17, 5 Jonin on each side. On paper, it looked perfectly even. In practice, however, the balance broke as soon as the first exchanges began. Among the Chunin, skill gaps were small, and their duels promised to stretch on without a clear victor. But Nathan's match was different. His opponent was a seasoned Jonin, yet no match for Nathan's speed and precision. After barely a dozen clashes of blade and chakra, the Cloud Jonin found himself on the defensive and, cornered, was forced to summon backup. That call for reinforcements shattered any pretense of parity. 2 more Cloud Shinobi sprang forward to assist their squad leader, but by doing so, they left the other Cloud Jonin bearing the full weight of Konoha's Jonin onslaught. What began as a fair contest was swiftly tipping in Konoha's favor, all because Nathan had dispatched his opponent so decisively. Nathan's summoning had brought him an ally, but that didn't stop him from facing 2 ninjas of equal rank on the battlefield. Ordinarily, confronting 2 opponents at once might spell trouble, but these 2 were no match for him. Even with another shinobi at his side, he effortlessly seized the advantage and never gave it up. As the clash wore on, Nathan patiently watched for an opening. Then, in a flash, he called upon the Sharingan's acute insight to anticipate and dodge a powerful strike from the Kumogakure Jonin. Riding that momentum, he formed a Rasengan, an unmarked ninjutsu, and drove it straight into the other Cloud Ninja's chest. Crack! The thunderous snap of bone echoed across the arena. The impact sent the Cloud Ninja flying backward, a geyser of blood erupting from his mouth. By the time he hit the ground, his breaths were shallow and ragged. He was utterly spent, unable to rise again. Nathan's opponent, a shinobi of the Cloud Village who had just missed striking him, watched in alarm as Nathan closed the distance. The ninja's eyes widened, and he instinctively tried to pull back and regroup with his teammates, but Nathan gave him no chance. With a swift arc of his blade, Nathan unleashed 2 of his deadliest sword techniques in succession. The Phantom Sword technique followed immediately by the Shadow Sword technique. In a flash, 6 ethereal sword images, 3 genuine strikes, and 3 illusory feints whipped through the air from different angles. Caught off guard by the onslaught, the Cloud Village ninja couldn't react in time. Nathan's blade sliced across his right chest, leaving a shallow but painful cut. Without pausing to gloat, Nathan lifted his free left hand and sealed his fingers into position. Fire style, great fireball technique, he intoned. Almost instantly, a roaring orb of flame over 2 meters in diameter condensed before him. Spinning like a burning planet, the fireball hurtled forward and slammed into the wounded ninja, engulfing him in searing heat. Although the Cloud Shinobi seized the moment of his injury to fall back, the reprieve was brief. He still stood well within Nathan's deadly radius. Caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, he could only twist his body aside and hope for the best. Boom! A roaring fireball whipped past him and slammed into a massive tree behind him, instantly igniting its trunk in a wall of flame. The Cloud Shinobi gritted his teeth against the sting on his left arm, but knew he needed distance. He yanked himself backward, and then, in the same heartbeat, a green flash lit the air. Nathan's silhouette swirled with chakra as he unleashed his famed instant sword technique, closing the gap in an almost imperceptible blink. Startled, the Cloud Shinobi's eyes locked onto Nathan's, only to freeze in horror. Scarlet flames erupted in Nathan's pupils, the legendary Sharingan. He tried to wrench his gaze away, panic coursing through him, but Nathan had anticipated every move. At the very instant their eyes met, Nathan activated the long-prepared genjutsu, Sharingan, and the world around the cloud shinobi began to warp. Could you please provide the full chapter text that you'd like me to rewrite? Once I have the complete passage, I'll transform it into a smooth, idiomatic English version with Nathan as the male protagonist. Chapter 691, Escape and Pursuit. Captain! Captain! The remaining cloud shinobi called out in desperation as their leader staggered under Nathan's jutsu. But their cries could not break the illusion. With his fully awakened Sharingan and overwhelming mental strength, Nathan was utterly beyond their reach. He ignored their pleas, formed the necessary hand seals, and invoked his next technique, chakra absorption. In a single swift motion, Nathan seized the middle-aged ninja by the throat. A torrent of chakra flooded into Nathan's reserves, draining the captive's life force like water through a sieve. The ninja's struggles weakened, each breath grew more ragged until, within moments, he went completely still. The lifeblood of the Cloud's senior fighter had been extinguished. Around them, other Cloud shinobi surged forward, determined to rescue their captain. But Konoha's elite, drawn here to support Nathan's mission, formed an unbreakable barrier of kunai and defensive seals. Time and again they drove back the attackers. Helpless, the Cloud warriors could only watch as their leader's body slumped lifelessly in Nathan's grip. Nathan released the corpse and stepped back, the cold determination in his eyes never wavering. The battlefield had shifted in a heartbeat. Now there was only one thing left to do: press the advantage, slip away before reinforcements arrived, and ensure that no one else stood in his path. Nathan drained the middle-aged Cloud ninja's chakra and immediately dashed at another warrior, already grievously wounded by his Rasengan. The second ninja, seeing him close in, desperately flung a handful of kunai fitted with explosive tags. But in Nathan's Sharingan, those kunai moved at a crawl. With barely a flicker of motion, he evaded each blade. Then, in a breath, he unleashed his flash sword technique. Before the ninja could even register his presence, Nathan's blade appeared at his back. A sickening puff shattered the tense air as the long sword sliced clean through the man's neck, severing his head in one swift stroke. Crimson blood erupted like a fountain, drenching everything within several meters. The remaining Cloud ninjas froze at the gruesome sight. Realizing they were hopelessly outmatched, they cried, "Retreat!" and scattered into the forest to the right. Without hesitation, 12 more hidden warriors surged forward to cover their escape. But by then, Nathan was already vanishing into the trees, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. Nathan had moved so swiftly that, although several Cloud ninjas were injured, not a single one was killed. 12 of them still stood. Watching the hidden Cloud squad scatter in an instant, the Kono ninjas all turned to Nathan. Some asked what his next move would be. Others simply stared in awe. After all, in just a few minutes, he'd dispatched 2 full-fledged jonin, one after another, an astonishing display of skill and bravery. Any lingering doubts about Nathan's leadership vanished right then. If every engagement went like this, keeping the 3 Cloud teams separated and defeating them individually, they could handle whatever came next. Now that they knew the enemy's positions, it wasn't a difficult task. No one questioned Nathan's decisions anymore. Nathan ignored the wary looks cast his way. Spotting the Cloud shinobi glancing back, he snapped, "Keep up the chase. Don't let them get away." "Understood." The Konoha ninjas answered in unison. They broke into 4 squads and pursued the fleeing Cloud team. At that moment, the Hyuga shinobi who'd been concealed in the shadows stepped forward. Instead of falling back with the others, he approached Nathan with a grave expression. "There's a sensory ninja among them," he reported quietly. "She just detected my surveillance." Nathan inclined his head calmly. He had suspected as much the instant he noticed the Cloud unit's extreme vigilance. If the Hyuga's Byakugan reconnaissance had been discovered, then his own covert observation, also relying on the Byakugan, must have been exposed as well. Clearly, the Cloud ninjas had sensed something amiss from the start. That explained their caution and why, upon spotting a second spy, they halted just outside his ambush instead of marching right into it. Nathan watched as the senior Hyuga shinobi glanced back at him, hesitation flickering in his pale eyes. The mission allowed no delays, and the Cloud Ninja's scout held a limited perception range. No matter how cunningly he hovered outside the ambush circle, he couldn't avoid Nathan's reach forever. Realizing that Nathan had already spotted the threat, the Hyuga elder abandoned his cautionary words with a nod. He fell into step with the rest of their team as they surged forward, vanishing into the misty tree line in pursuit of the fleeing cloud operatives. Calmly, Nathan wiped the crimson smear from his blade, slipped it into its scabbard, and set off after them. His mind raced through their plan. One by one, they would pick off these enemy shinobi to prevent reinforcements from rallying. Even though the scout's sensory jutsu was far weaker than their own, it still posed a dangerous variable. The sooner they silenced him, the fewer complications they'd face. With that resolve burning in his chest, Nathan quickened his pace, determined to lead the strike that would tip the balance in their favor. Soon, the clash of weapons echoed up ahead. Before they could scatter, a group of Kumogakure Chunin stumbled into an ambush laid by Nathan's team and were forced into a fierce skirmish. Nathan barely paused. He cast a quick glance, confirmed his side held the advantage, then activated his instant body technique and darted onward. As he pressed forward, he passed several more battlefields, each pitting Chunin against Chunin, and time after time, Nathan's squads dominated. This wasn't because Kumogakure's Chunin were inferior. On the contrary, as a village that prizes martial skill above all, Kumogakure's mid-level ninja are among the strongest in the 5 great nations, and these were their elite. The real edge belonged to Nathan's forces. Hunting from the rear, they could choose where and when to strike, pouring reinforcements into each clash. With flexible deployment and local numerical superiority, they consistently overwhelmed their opponents. Because most of their reinforcements had been sent elsewhere, only 3 Jonin and a handful of Chunin were left to pursue the Cloud Ninjas, barely enough to keep up, and certainly not enough to risk a counterattack. Every second mattered as the fugitives raced ahead through the forest. Suddenly, a lone figure stepped into their path. It was Nathan. Without a word, he raised his hand, formed a swift series of seals, and unleashed his earth release technique, Earth Flowing River. Though he hadn't perfected it, his 6th-level proficiency was more than enough. The very soil at his feet trembled, melting into a raging torrent of mud that surged backward. The 3 Jonin and their Chunin escorts barely had time to react. Startled, they scattered and scrambled up the nearest giant tree to avoid being swept away. Nathan and the others had only just climbed onto the sturdy branch when the mudslide struck. The rushing torrent yanked the tree from its roots, and suddenly the branch vanished beneath them. Swept up in the churning slurry, they could do nothing but fling themselves from one exposed trunk to the next. Each desperate leap, their only hope of staying above the engulfing mud. Chapter 692, Continuous Killings. Ahead of him, the Cloud Village shinobi were faltering, splitting apart under the relentless onslaught. Nathan seized the moment. He reformed the hand seals in a blur and called forth his signature technique, Fire Style, Great Dragon Flame. He drew in a lungful of air, his chest swelling as chakra surged through his veins. At the apex of his focus, he unleashed a thunderous exhalation, expelling 3 immense serpents of flame. The fiery dragons twisted and coiled in the air, each one a scorching harbinger of destruction, aimed squarely at the 3 remaining Cloud Ninjas. 2 of them, Ijizi and another teammate, leaped aside just in time. The third, however, instinctively formed his own seals, chanting Water Style, Water Dragon Bullet. A massive spiraling torrent erupted from his palms, charging headlong into Nathan's raging fire. The moment water met flame, a deafening explosion ripped through the clearing. Scalding steam and sparks rained down in all directions, blanketing the battlefield in a blistering cloud nearly 30 meters across. Several Kumo Chunin, caught by surprise, were knocked off their feet by the blast. Shouts and the smell of singed uniforms filled the air, but Nathan's gaze never wavered. He knew there was no time to tend to the wounded. His mission, and countless lives, depended on maintaining the pressure. With his next target already in sight, he pressed forward, ready to unleash the next chapter of devastation. He'd use that technique to pin Nathan in place, hoping to give his two companions the opening they needed. Now it was up to them. But as he focused, his expression shifted in shock. Of the pair charging in on Nathan, one stood frozen, eyes vacant, clearly caught in an illusion. The other was less than a meter away, limbs locked fast by a strange sealing jutsu. Nathan turned, regarding the Kumogakure Jonin before him. The man clutched a kunai even as inky runes wrapped around his arms, the dreaded self-injury curse seal. A low chuckle escaped Nathan's lips as he reached for the long sword at his hip, ready to finish him off. Spotting that, Kato, he snapped back to reality. He yanked several shuriken from his pouch and hurled them at Nathan. At once, the surrounding Kumogakure Chunin joined in, tossing bombs, unleashing wind blades, and weaving elemental ninjutsu in a coordinated barrage. Nathan, however, merely cast them a lazy glance, as if swatting away a bothersome fly. After confirming there were no further hidden attacks, Nathan raised his hand and wove a quick seal. In an instant, he activated both his chakra feather robe and the earth-style hardening technique. The next wave of assaults, shuriken, kunai, explosive tags, and ninjutsu, struck him in rapid succession, but none made so much as a scratch. The kunai and other physical weapons shattered harmlessly against his hardened earth armor, while the energy-based jutsu dissipated on impact with the chakra-infused feathers cloaking his body. Nathan remained unscathed. Seizing the moment, he drew the slender longsword at his waist, and with a single, lightning-fast slash, severed the throat of the special jonin from Kumogakure, who'd been immobilized by his own self-injury curse seal. A geyser of blood spurted into the air, and the jonin's head sailed skyward before landing with a soft thud. Nathan stepped back, blade still dripping. He surveyed the fallen shinobi and shook his head. This was no ordinary warrior, but a specialist in stealth and assassination. Yet the instant Nathan pinpointed his location, the kill had been all too effortless. Nathan paid no mind to the terrified stares around him. His gaze locked onto Ichizo, the Kumogakure Jonin he'd ensnared with his illusion, Sharingan. It was brutally unlucky for Ichizo. Nathan had meant only to muddle the Jonin's senses and judgment to aid his team's sneak attack. But the moment he unleashed his Mangekyo Sharingan, the illusion snapped into full control. Technically, had Nathan mastered the Uchiha's secret genjutsu, mirrored heaven and earth, Roda, tie-in, he could have achieved the same effect with just the 3-tomo Sharingan. Shaking off the thought, he let emerald chakra swirl around him as he prepared to strike with his instant sword technique. At that instant, Kato-hi materialized beside Ichizo, channeling a strand of chakra into the jonin. The illusion shattered. Nathan's jaw tightened in annoyance, but before he could react, 2 Kumogakure Chunin advanced on him. Ichizo blinked, eyes clearing, and finally saw Nathan standing before him. The battlefield crackled with tension as Nathan readied himself for the next move. Jingjizi's breath caught as she saw Nathan's eyes flash back into the 3-tomo Sharingan. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but before a word escaped, Nathan's long sword slashed toward her. Instinctively, she leaned back, and the blade whooshed past, missing her by inches. In that split second, Kato. He sprang forward and thrust a kunai at Nathan's chest. Nathan's earth-style hardening technique had just worn off, leaving only his chakra feather garb, hardly enough to stop a direct stab. Forced to abandon his strike on Jingzizi, Nathan spun his sword around and planted its flat against the kunai's hilt. Ding! The clash of metal rang out as Nathan tilted his blade, sending the kunai skittering off. Kato-hi's follow-through carried him forward, the weapon grazing Nathan's side as it clipped free. In an instant, the two were face to face. The gap between them vanished. Nathan's eyes flared as he formed a spinning sphere of chakra in his left palm, the Rasengan, directed straight for his opponent's chest. "Watch out!" Jingzizi's warning cut through the air. In the same instant, she hurled a kunai that whistled toward his throat. Instinctively, Nathan activated his Sharingan and tilted his head, letting the blade graze past his neck. Yet that slight movement gave Kato-hi the chance he needed. Seeing the densely condensed chakra ball in Nathan's hand, recalling how the third team's captain had nearly died from its power, Kato-hi broke into a cold sweat. He wheeled aside to evade the attack and, with reflexive speed, slashed back with his own kunai aimed at Nathan's chest. The two weapons collided with a sharp ring. Nathan gripped his kunai hilt and blocked, sparks flying where metal met metal. His reprieve was brief. Kato. He pressed forward without mercy, launching a relentless flurry of strikes. Determined not to yield an inch, Nathan braced himself, ready for whatever came next. For a tense moment, the clang of metal rang out again and again as Nathan and Kato exchanged blows in the cramped room. At first, Kato's paired kunai gave him the edge. Those short, razor-sharp blades allowed him to strike in close quarters faster than a sword could reach. But Nathan was nothing if not adaptable. He met each kunai with his blade, parrying and thrusting until he restored the balance, and then began to tip it in his favor. Even with the walls pressing in around them, Nathan's swordplay proved superior. With a single, deft slice, he nicked Kato's arm. The wound was small, a thin ribbon of blood, but it spoke volumes. Nathan's skill in close-quarters combat far outmatched his opponent's. At the edge of the fray, Jingjizi watched with widening eyes. She understood at once. Kato. He stood no chance. Desperation flared in her gaze as she raised her hands, beginning the intricate seals of a ninjutsu spell that would turn the tide. What she didn't realize was that Nathan's true target had been her all along. In the blink of an eye, Nathan abandoned his duel. One of Kato's kunai grazed his waist, sending a burning trail of pain up his side, but he scarcely paused. He vanished from Kato's view and reappeared before Jingjizi in an instant, too close for her to react. Ah! Jingjizi's cry echoed through the chamber as she staggered backward, her spell forgotten. She pressed against the wall, eyes wide with shock, and realized it was already too late. Almost the moment she moved, Nathan invoked his lightning release technique, Lightning Sword. A searing flash raced along his blade, momentarily blinding Jingjizi and warping her senses. Then came a whisper of wind. She barely registered the searing pain at her throat before the world tilted and air fled her lungs. When the lightning's glare finally ebbed, Jingjizi's trembling hand flew to her neck. She stared up at Nathan through a haze of shock and despair. Jingjizi! Behind her, Kato, his anguished cry rang out. He'd known her longer than anyone, shared battles and laughter. Yet in that instant, none of their history could halt the fate Nathan had sealed. Chapter 693, Reinforcements and the Instant Kill. Nathan heard Kato Kazak's urgent shout. He withdrew his longsword, letting Jingjizi's body slip to the ground, and turned his gaze back to Kato. Though Kazak's eyes burned with rage and hatred, he knew he was no match for Nathan alone. With a curt command, he signaled his Yunyin warriors to retreat and bolted toward the forest's edge. At his cry of "Go!", the group of Yunyin soldiers, dazed as if roused from a nightmare, snapped out of their stupor. One by one, faces pale with terror, they stampeded into the trees. Nathan did not pursue them, not because he intended to let them off the hook, but because help had arrived on his side. Scouts from the Woodleaf clan, whom he'd sent ahead, finally caught up. Their reinforcements would handle any further conflict with Kato's remaining men. Nathan, meanwhile, had more pressing matters to attend to. He sheathed his sword, took a steadying breath, and slipped silently into the forest's depths. Nathan's eyes darted from Kato Kaga's position to the faint signs of another Union detachment approaching across the ridge. Now that his undercover informant had been exposed, it was only a matter of time before a distress signal reached the other two Yun ninja teams. They weren't far apart. Once the call went out, reinforcements would be on top of Kato Kaga in seconds. And with the skirmish still raging, letting two fresh squads join the fray could turn the tide disastrously. Nathan knew he had to act himself. He formed a quick hand seal and invoked the mind link technique, embedding his battle plan into a handful of carved wooden talismans. Then, gathering every ounce of speed, he unleashed his instant skill and vanished in a blur toward the most likely approach route of the incoming Union forces. Barely 60 seconds passed before Nathan came to a stop, well clear of the main battlefield. He paused only long enough to ensure no Ningxiang scout had followed him, then relaxed the guardian seal pressed between his eyebrows. With his chakra fully restored and his path clear, he prepared to intercept the enemy before they could reinforce Kato Kaga. Nathan gathered his spirit, opened his eyes, and activated his perspective ability, sweeping the area for any trace of Yunren. He knew that if Yunren's team had an operative with perception on par with Jingjizi, someone who could detect even a hidden grass snake spirit, they would have found him during their earlier large-scale search. Clearly, no such ninja was among their ranks. He felt no unease. Even if a threat lurked unseen, his confidence in his own strength told him he could crush it with sheer force. In fact, a small part of him secretly hoped they would come looking for him. It would save him the trouble of hunting them down. Emboldened by this thought, Nathan made his movements increasingly bold and reckless. Luck, it turned out, was on his side. Fully prepared to be discovered, he waited and was pleasantly surprised when none of Yunren's support team reacted to his presence. There were no ambushes, no skilled shinobi springing traps. Nathan allowed himself a satisfied grin. His gamble had paid off. Nathan crouched amid the thick branches of an ancient oak, his eyes tracking the squad of central shinobi winding through the underbrush below. With a practiced motion, he formed the hand seals and unleashed his A-rank illusion, Nirvana Featherfall. In an instant, a drifting cascade of pure white feathers, each suffused with hypnotic chakra, fluttered down like snow, wrapping the shinobi in a dreamlike haze. Their forward march slowed, eyelids growing heavy. But these were elite operatives, experts in chakra control and illusion craft. 2 of them reacted in a heartbeat. They formed seals of their own, disrupted their chakra flow, and shattered the phantom glamour. A 3rd shinobi, alert to the danger, shouted, "Heads up! It's an illusion!" Nathan's primary target, Yunren, had already sensed the threat. With a decisive stomp, Yunren channeled his chakra to sever the illusion's final threads. As the last feather dissolved into mist, Nathan clenched his fist in frustration high among the branches. His ambush had been foiled. They dropped their guard into a tight defensive formation, dampening their perceptions as they swept the area for hidden threats. Nathan only sneered at their caution. Of course, his illusions hadn't seized control of them. He never intended that. He knew the limits of the Nirvana Square all too well. Total domination was out of the question. His sole goal had been to halt their advance, nothing more. Under his breath, he chanted a string of cryptic syllables, Yi, Yi, 619, Yi, and readied his true killing technique. Crack! A blinding flash of thunder shattered the air as torrents of electricity bore outward from his form. In an instant, a shimmering barrier rippled into existence, expanding to cover 100 meters in every direction. Within its bounds, coils of purple-black lightning writhed and arced violently, hammering the earth into a vast, smoking crater. Trees caught in the onslaught were cleaved in two, their trunks split and charred before erupting in flame under the storm's wrath. Lightning release. Thunder prison. Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper, but the crackle of electricity that followed left no doubt. This was no ordinary jutsu. Though officially ranked B, in his hands it struck with the ferocity of an A-rank technique, especially when used as a surprise attack. The very first time he deployed it against root operatives, he'd wiped out more than a dozen in an instant. Now he unleashed that same devastating power once more. After a few breaths, the shimmering cage of lightning dissolved. Nathan activated his Byakugan and swept the clearing where the Cloud Ninjas had stood. 14 bodies lay scattered across the scorched earth, their flesh blackened and smoking, the air thick with the stench of burnt meat. There was no mistaking it, they were all dead. Among them, he counted 12 Cloud Chunin and 2 average Jonin. He hadn't eliminated the entire squad at once, but the outcome more than satisfied him. 3 opponents still remained. Nathan lifted his gaze and locked onto them, each one trembling in the electric haze. They were cornered now, and nowhere left to run. At that moment, 3 Cloud Ninja came tearing into the clearing, faces pale with panic. They were the only survivors from the Thunder Prison just now. Judging by the strength of their chakra, Nathan could tell they were bona fide Jonin, precisely why they'd sensed his stealth assault and managed to slip away at the last second. Chapter 694, An Unexpected Discovery. Nathan crouched in the shadows, his keen eyes never leaving the 3 figures patrolling the clearing. Moments ago, he had crept within arm's reach of them, undetected, his breath stilled and his presence concealed. But a single misstep on a loose rock had betrayed him, and the instant snapping of a twig shattered the stillness. Now the trio of senior ninjas had him squarely in their sights. He'd known it was only a matter of time before stealth alone would no longer suffice. With 3 opponents left, all highly skilled but each still beneath his own level, Nathan decided the time for hiding was over. He inhaled deeply, letting his pulse steady. A brief smirk touched his lips. There were only 3 of them. They could not stand against him once he committed to the attack. "Let's finish this," he murmured. In the next heartbeat, Nathan unleashed the lightning flash body technique. His form blurred, and he vanished from view for an instant. The 3 ninjas reacted immediately, exchanging quick glances before springing into motion. One sprinted left, another charged straight ahead, the third swept around to the right. Their movements formed a pincer designed to trap him. But Nathan anticipated their tactic. As they fanned out, he reappeared at the center, his cloak whipping in the air like a living thing. The distance between him and each opponent collapsed in an instant. His hand drifted to the hilt of his blade, every muscle coiled and ready. Before his adversaries could coordinate their strike, he would be upon them, and the battle would be over. Nathan steadied himself as his 3 opponents closed in. Without hesitation, he snapped his fingers together, completing the hand seal in an instant, then unleashed his ninjutsu, fire style, great dragon fire technique. A roaring blast of flame erupted from his mouth, twisting into 3 gargantuan fire dragons that lunged at each enemy. The warrior on the left vanished in a puff of smoke, using substitution jutsu, and reappeared right beside Nathan, sword drawn, pressing the attack. The fighter in the center planted his feet, channeling earth-release ninjutsu to raise a stone barricade that swallowed the dragon's onslaught. On the right, lightning crackled over the third adversary's skin, transforming him into a blurred afterimage that the fire dragon simply passed through. Throughout it all, Nathan's Sharingan remained focused, tracking every movement. His expression stayed calm, until the electrical aura dancing across his final opponent brightened within his gaze. The sudden spike in speed confirmed what he'd suspected all along. Nathan had first witnessed this state in the third Raikage, through his shadow clone during Nathan's own mission to earn his Jonin stripes, and later in the battle between Iwagakure and Kumogakure. If his instincts were right, this had to be the Hidden Cloud Village's secret ninjutsu, Lightning Chakra Mode. He'd long dreamed of acquiring it, of using its power to supercharge his body and boost his physical strength. But that chance had always slipped through his fingers. Now, with this opportunity suddenly before him, how could Nathan not be electrified with excitement? He respected the Palm Immortal technique. Its basic form fortified the body, and its advanced variant was even more impressive. But why limit himself? If he could, he'd even tackle the 8 gates of Dungia to eliminate any lingering doubts about his physique. Unfortunately, none of those forbidden arts were stored in Danzo's collection, or Nathan's path to greater power would already be clear. Nathan's mind buzzed with thoughts, but he forced himself to lock onto the battle before him. The sudden emergence of Lightning Chakra Mode had startled him, but if he let himself dwell on it, his opponent might slip away, or worse, catch him off guard. No, he had to finish this fight here and now. Die! A shinobi from the Cloud Village, having just used a substitution technique to dodge the fire dragon's blast, reappeared at Nathan's side. With his hands eed from the residual afterimage, the ninja lashed out, driving a kunai toward Nathan's neck. To the average eye, the strike would vanish in a flicker. But through Nathan's Sharingan, every millisecond registered with crystal clarity. Summoning his superhuman reflexes, he tilted his head just enough. The blade grazed his carotid artery, drawing a thin line of blood, but missed its fatal mark. Just millimeters separated them, like a natural moat Nathan couldn't close. Akita's brow darkened as he halted, drawing a kunai and driving it straight for Nathan's throat. But Nathan was ready. With a thunderous blast, the earth beneath him erupted. Nathan rocketed backward like a cannonball, narrowly evading the blade. Mid-air, he formed a swift hand seal as chakra crackled through his veins. "Wind release, wind blade," he intoned. In his palm materialized a nearly transparent blade of compressed air, its edge honed razor-sharp. Nathan guided the gust toward Akita, who was enveloped in lightning-charged chakra as he charged. Wind disperses electricity, and Nathan's blade sliced through the crackling currents before they could strike. Akita's defensive aura flickered, and unable to withstand the onslaught, he was forced to leap aside. Nathan landed lightly and prepared to press his advantage. He opened his mouth to call out the next technique. But before he could move, a flurry of kunai hissed in from the shadows, their steel points aimed unmistakably at his back. Nathan's senses prickled in the darkness, a warning of imminent danger. He spun to his right just in time to see kunai hurtling toward him, each rigged with a detonating talisman. Without breaking stride, he activated his flash body technique and blurred out of the way. The kunai slammed into the tree trunks behind him, and moments later, the talismans erupted in a series of fiery blasts. Scarlet fireballs burst forth, trailing waves of heat that radiated through the clearing. Nathan's hand shot up in a precise seal, and with a shimmer of chakra he wove the chakra feather robe around himself. A translucent barrier formed in an instant, absorbing the flames and dissipating their concussive force. Seizing the opportunity, he sprang forward, eyes locked on the cloud-hidden shinobi who'd thrown the attack. This opponent had positioned himself farthest from Nathan's two allies, an opening Nathan couldn't ignore. Drawing his longsword in mid-stride, he launched himself at the ninja. Before Nathan could close the distance, however, the enemy activated lightning chakra mode. Moving with electrified speed, the shinobi evaded Nathan's advance and countercharged, the air crackling around him. It was clear, under this enhanced chakra state, his reflexes outpaced Nathan's, even in his heightened form. A clash was inevitable. Nathan didn't hesitate. He dropped his guard and shifted his stance in an instant, slashing at the cloud-hidden ninja's flank with his long sword. A sharp clang rang out as steel met steel. The ninja raised his right forearm, the metal plate on his gauntlet absorbing the blow, then summoned lightning chakra to surge along the blade in a riposte. Most fighters would have faltered under that attack, but not Nathan. The all-around protection of his chakra feather robe was in a class of its own. The crackling lightning fizzled harmlessly against the robe's pale blue weave, and Nathan remained completely unscathed. Yanoso's eyes widened in shock. He tried to pull his arm back, but Nathan wouldn't give him the chance. With a decisive flick of his wrist, he flipped the sword from a vertical strike to a horizontal sweep, driving the blade down the length of Yano's arm and aiming straight for his neck. Nathan certainly wanted to wrest the secret of lightning chakra mode from his opponent, but he had no intention of going easy. He refused to believe the other shinobi couldn't handle the assault. After all, lightning chakra mode might be only a B-rank ninjutsu, but its true power depends entirely on the wielder's skill. As a hidden Cloud Village secret, it was beyond spill. The reach of ordinary practitioners, so anyone capable of using it must be a jonin with serious credentials and formidable strength. Chapter 695. Opening Nathan's instincts proved spot on. The moment his longsword's tip whispered against Yanosong's throat, Yano arched backward in a breath's worth of time, evading the killing stroke by sheer reflex. The blade skimmed his cheek, severing a few strands of hair as a gust of wind swept past. Yano's heart thundered. He felt Nathan's cold, murderous intent like a blade at his back. With one powerful kick, he rocketed backward, spinning out of reach and foiling Nathan's planned follow-up completely. Nathan let out a low, amused chuckle. Wise decision. Before he could reposition, a kunai whistled over his shoulder, Akita's throw, forcing him to pivot aside. Then Nathan rolled forward, gathering momentum as he locked eyes on the real target, the Kumogakure Jonin who had just countered his Fire Dragon jutsu. The lightning-quick Jonin had met the Inferno head-on, summoning an Earth Escape barrier that absorbed the blast. While he'd used Nathan's clash with Yanosong to close the gap on Nathan's allies, he remained cut off, stranded, and alone. Perfect. Nathan was the obvious target. Of the three fighters, he was by far the weakest in close quarters, so he drew the first attack. From across the courtyard, Miura Naosuke spotted Nathan charging straight at him. With a cool smile, Naosuke sidestepped and drifted backward. As he retreated, Naosuke formed a quick hand seal and unleashed a basic fire escape ninjutsu. A volley of fireballs streaked toward Nathan, but the technique was rushed and underpowered. Instantly, Nathan's Sharingan snapped open, the Tomoe whirling as he traced each fiery arc. Rather than counter with ninjutsu of his own, he relied on his superhuman reflexes, slipping effortlessly between the blasts without losing an ounce of speed. Closing the distance, Nathan drew a kunai in one fluid motion. In the same heartbeat, he unleashed 3 lightning-fast slashes, raking Naosuke's chest, neck, and lower abdomen. No elaborate jutsu bolstered those strikes, only raw speed and unrelenting power. But it was those 3 deceptively simple sword strikes that sent an unprecedented chill down Sampu Naosuke's spine. Nathan's blade flickered so swiftly he could barely make out its path, forcing Naosuke to fall back on pure instinct to defend himself. Ding! 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 3 sharp clashes of steel rang out as Nathan's longsword met Naosuke's kunai, and to his surprise, Naosuke managed to block every blow flawlessly. Nathan, however, showed no surprise. From the opening swings to the final parry, Naosuke's technique had revealed a glaring weakness. Close-quarters combat was not his forte. It made sense. Compared to his 2 comrades, Naosuke's hand-to-hand prowess did lag slightly behind. That was why he usually let them spearhead frontal assaults. Even so, his skills still outstripped those of an average chunin, and many tokubetsu jonin as well. After all, he was a fully qualified jonin. Yes, in some areas he trailed his teammates, but those were far from fatal flaws. Otherwise, he never would have risen to his rank. This was no minor ninja hamlet where standards could be lowered. As one of the 5 great shinobi villages, and renowned across the lands for its martial prowess, the Hidden Cloud Village has no patience for weakness. A ninja who cannot back up his rank with real strength has no place among the jonin. There's no point in pretending otherwise. The other 4 great villages don't merely tally your jonin, they watch every move your shinobi make. They measure you by your skill, not your title. These thoughts raced through Nathan's mind as he squared off against his opponent. Without a flicker of hesitation, he lunged forward and unleashed his instant sword technique. In the blink of an eye, he was at Miura Naosuke's side, blade aimed for the kill. Naosuke managed to raise his kunai just in time, deflecting 3 razor-sharp slashes, but Nathan followed up instantly with a 4th strike. Caught off guard, Naosuke planted his feet, twisted his torso, and escaped by the narrowest margin. Sensing his rival's momentary imbalance, Nathan slipped aside, reappeared at Naosuke's flank, and swung his sword in a deadly arc. Naosuke stumbled backward to evade the blow, his breathing ragged, while Nathan pressed the attack without mercy. Each strike drove Naosuke further onto the defensive, until one decisive cut would settle the trial once and for all. For a heartbeat, Nathan seemed to dissolve into mist, reappearing behind Miura Naosuke in a deadly whirlwind of strikes that forced him onto the defensive. In that moment, Miura finally grasped why they called him Ghost Sword. The 2 other Kumogakure jonin with Miura exchanged uneasy looks. They recognized that fighting style. Although Nathan hadn't set foot on their battlefields for 2 or 3 years, the newly risen prodigy of Konoha had never slipped entirely from Kumogakure's watch. A blog post here, a forum thread there, reports of his feats had reached even their remote outposts. At first, they'd written off the stories as exaggeration. Now all skepticism evaporated. Whether Nathan's arrival signaled the annihilation of the squad that had requested their aid or some other mission was beside the point. His raw power was unmistakable. In mere moments, he had cut down more than a dozen shinobi, and every one of them had fallen before they even knew what hit them. You might insist that Nathan's staggering body count was simply the result of a perfect ambush. But in the world of shinobi, deception is as commonplace as breathing. End justifies the means, and success is the only currency that matters. Nathan's flawless sneak attack didn't make him dishonorable. It underlined just how far above the rest of them he stood. Who in their right mind would ever underestimate him again? By the time Nathan engaged Miura Naosuke head-on, Akita Lee and Yano So were already barreling in to cut him off. Without a moment's hesitation, the 2 leapt into the fray. 3 attackers against 1 defender, Nathan was suddenly forced onto the defensive, pressed hard from both sides. Naosuke slid toward the edge of Nathan's striking range, searching for an opening to slip away. For a heartbeat, Nathan hesitated. Then he shut out the chaos around him and centered his mind. Activating the Byakugan, he swept his surroundings with perfection. No hidden traps, no unseen reinforcements. Satisfied the coast was clear, he let his Manjikyo Sharingan flare to life. He had no time for delay. Another Cloud Ninja team would be on them any minute, and every second he lingered meant greater losses for the dozen men he'd brought. Eyes blazing crimson, Nathan stepped forward, ready to turn the tide in an instant. Nathan knew that battlefield losses were inevitable. Everyone fought for their own survival, after all. But if circumstances allowed, he'd prefer to keep casualties to a minimum. This wasn't out of saintly compassion. He'd slain Danzo only weeks ago, and the village was still on edge. Earning a little goodwill now couldn't hurt. Better a handful of grateful allies than a slew of angry ones when the dust settled. And since it cost him nothing, why not try? As these thoughts raced through his mind, Nathan's eyes suddenly flared with the distinctive pattern of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Black, sun-like swirls spun into being in his irises. Before the three Kumogakure Jonin could even register the change, he activated the secret technique dwelling in his left eye, Ame no Mi. Chapter 696. Overwhelming Nathan's three-tomo Sharingan flared to life in his field of vision. Miura Naosuke barely had time to shout a warning to his two companions when Nathan simply vanished. What? Where did he go? Miura gasped, spinning around as he and his teammates frantically scanned the clearing. Seasoned shinobi though they were, surprise had them scrambling to form a tight back-to-back defense, hoping to guard against any unseen assault. Before they could complete their formation, Nathan reappeared silently behind Miura. The rustle of his cloak was the only hint of his return. Miura's eyes went wide. "Watch out!" Yano so cried, his keen instincts picking up the slightest shift in the air. Without hesitation, Yano spun and flung his kunai straight for Nathan's throat. Nathan didn't even flinch. With uncanny speed, he slashed sideways at the back of Miura Naosuke's neck. A thin arc of crimson bloomed, and Miura crumpled to the ground, the grass beneath him darkening with blood. In that single, fluid motion, Nathan had turned the tide, leaving only two stunned opponents to wonder what had just happened. Miura Naosuke was suddenly seized by a powerful sense of danger. A chill ran from the base of his spine up to the back of his skull. Fortunately, Yanoso's warning had been just in time. He dropped into a crouch to evade the unseen strike, quickly forming hand seals and unleashing the body substitution technique. With a sharp bang, a plume of chakra smoke billowed out, and Naosuke's form vanished, leaving behind nothing but a wooden stake. Nathan's long blade swept down, cleaving it cleanly in two. At the same moment, a kunai hurled by Yano-so hurtled toward Nathan's throat. Triumph flickered across So's face as he watched the deadly projectile find its mark. But before that flash of joy could settle, shock overtook him. Nathan had vanished. The kunai had pierced only an illusion. Realizing the true danger, Yano-so whirled and shouted to Miura Naosuke, who was still nearby, "Watch out!" Naosuke had already seen Nathan's phantom vanish. He'd been on high alert after So's warning, but his vigilance wasn't enough this time. A whistling kunai tore through the air, aimed squarely at Miura's chest. Nathan appeared suddenly before him, and the instant their eyes locked, Miura Naosuke's Sharingan flashed open, unleashing its hypnotic power. As a true jonin, Miura's mental fortitude was formidable. Even the Mangekyo-level genjutsu only left him momentarily dazed. He was already clearing his head when Nathan's left hand shot forward and struck him squarely in the chest. A wrenching force radiated from Nathan's palm, sending searing pain through Miura's ribs. Through blurred vision, he saw a dense sphere of chakra, roughly 10 centimeters in diameter, pulsing with a deadly aura under that crushing grip. "Rasengan!" Miura gasped, recognizing the technique moments before it landed. A gout of blood exploded from his mouth as the spiraling chakra tore into him. He was hurled backward into a massive tree, his body slamming against the trunk and sliding limply to the forest floor. For a long moment he lay there, unable to move. Nathan lingered at the edge of the clearing, his expression calm. He refrained from delivering the final, killing blow, at least for now. Nathan caught movement in his peripheral vision and immediately activated Heaven's Guard once more. In the next instant, a detonating kunai tore through his afterimage, embedding itself in the ground before erupting in a thunderous blast. But Heaven's Guard shrugged off the explosion as if it were nothing. Before Akita could react, Nathan vanished and reappeared behind him. Akita's lips twisted in surprise. He'd barely had time to hurl the kunai. Far off, Yanoso was charging down the hill, electricity crackling over his body, but Nathan paid him no mind. With a single fluid motion, he swung his sword in a straight, merciless arc. Swish! The blade cut into Akita's back, carving a deep scar that bled freely through his Cloud Village uniform. Akita staggered, pain flooding his senses, but Nathan pressed the attack. He flicked his wrist, shifting the sword from a horizontal slash into a devastating diagonal sweep. Already wounded and reeling, Akita could only throw up a feeble block as Nathan's blade descended, and once more tasted his blood. With a single, ruthless strike, Nathan severed half of Yanoso's right arm. In that instant, Yano stepped forward, his remaining hand crackling with lightning like a jagged blade. Nathan drew in a steady breath, gathered his chakra, and awakened his Manjikyo Sharingan's ultimate technique, Susanoo. He didn't release its full, hulking form, only enough to manifest the skeletal arm and ribcage. Even a lesser projection was formidable. Yanoso hurled his signature hell stab, four-palmed barrier hands straight at Nathan's Susanoo. The blow rang out as it struck the bone-like ribs, cracking them, but failing to shatter the defense. Yano's eyes flew wide when he realized his attack had done little more than leave superficial damage. Despite the thunderous power of his lightning-infused strike, Nathan's measured use of Susanoo had withstood the assault. Yano took a wary step back, astonishment flickering across his features. Nathan hadn't expected Sayo's counterstrike to land so weakly, and it certainly didn't penetrate his guard. Before Sayo could recover, Nathan's silver-white skeletal arm shot out and snatched Sayo's little finger just as he bent it back to prepare Hell Suzar, 3 Ben Guanshou. A crushing force thundered through Sayo's bones. Even the extra protection of his thunderous armor couldn't mute the pain. Crunch! Ah! Sayo howled, teeth gritted against the agony as sparks of lightning flickered around him in a frantic bid to shatter Nathan's grip. But Nathan smelled his moment and struck without hesitation. He yanked Sayo forward, planted his free hand on Sayo's shoulder, and locked eyes with him. Then, softly but decisively, he intoned the name of his next technique, illusion, Writing Wheel Eye. Sayo reacted instantly, trying to clamp his eyelids shut. But it was too late. The kaleidoscopic vision shattered his senses before he even had a chance to blink. Nathan's Sharingan flared to life, and in an instant his consciousness dove into Yano's mind. The swirling chakra lights around her dissolved like mist, and she froze where she stood, eyes glazed over. Yano! Miura Naoyosuke and Akita cried out in unison, bloodied and barely on their feet. They rushed forward, desperately slapping and shaking her, but Nathan's genjutsu, illusion, wheel-writing eye, empowered by his 3-tomo Sharingan, could not be broken from the outside. Only its caster could lift the seal. Nathan, however, had every intention of freeing her. He reached out, gripped Yano's shoulders firmly, and channeled chakra to manifest the ethereal armor of Susanoo around him. In the same heartbeat, a violet flash engulfed them both, and when the light faded, Nathan stood before the injured Akita, Yano safely at his side. With a roar, Nathan unleashed 2 techniques at once, the arcane blade technique and the shadow sword art. 6 spectral swords, each trailing its own shadow, converged above him in perfect formation before he drove them downward. Akita, his arm already broken, could not avoid the strike. 2 fresh gashes opened across his chest as the blades struck home. Seizing the moment, Nathan unleashed his instant swords technique. In the blink of an eye, he materialized behind Chuchian and drove his blade straight through the man's heart. Chuchian's eyes went dull as he stared down at the knife hilt protruding from his chest. With a weak groan, he collapsed. Nathan withdrew his long blade and let Chuchian's body slump to the ground. Then he turned his attention to Miura Nakura, who was still on his feet despite a grievous chest wound from the spiral pill technique. Although Miura's injury was severe, it had not felled him immediately, and Nathan refused to leave any loose ends. With a single, decisive strike, he ended Miura's life. When the dust settled, only one member of the 2nd Yun Ninja Squad remained standing, Yoshino. Chapter 6-7, Harvest Tap. Tap! Tap! Footsteps echoed in the dim corridor. Nathan slipped away from Naosuke Miura's lifeless body and crept toward Yano, who remained lost in his hallucinatory trance. Rather than diving straight into the other man's memories, Nathan first formed a hand seal and activated a ninjutsu, chakra absorption technique. Pressing his palm firmly against Yanoso's shoulder, Nathan felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of chakra flood into him. Completely unfazed, he calmed his thoughts and transmuted the stolen energy into his own reserves. Within seconds, every last drop of Yanoso's chakra had been drained. Still, Nathan pressed on, drawing out the man's mental and physical vitality until Yanoso's face went ashen and his body grew limp. At last, Nathan withdrew his hand. Even if Yanoso awoke now, he'd be too weakened to mount any resistance. Nathan allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. "Good," he whispered. Without a moment's hesitation, he plunged his gaze into Yanoso's eyes, activated his Sharingan, and wove a fresh genjutsu, reshaping the very illusion that held his target captive. Nathan wove a subtle illusion, gently guiding his target to reveal the memories he needed. It was a clever trick, disguised mind-reading, but ultimately a makeshift solution, far clumsier than the Yamanaka clan's ninjutsu, mind-reading technique. Fortunately, Nathan knew Danzo's secret archive contained fragments of that very jutsu. Someday, when he had more free time, he'd delve into those records and, with the help of his proficiency panel, master the technique properly, making memory extraction almost effortless. For now, though, he would work with what he had. Clearing his mind, Nathan focused on the lightning chakra mode hidden deep within his subject's memories. Time stretched on, every second measured by the steady beat of his concentration. 15 minutes later, he opened his eyes, and lightning danced within them. No surprise, really. He had successfully absorbed the complete training method for lightning chakra mode from his target's mind. Nathan realized that, beyond boosting his offense and defense, lightning chakra mode also gradually strengthens the body as you train. That muscular reinforcement is essential. No matter how fast you become, it's useless if your reactions can't keep up. Unfortunately, he'd only learned the method and safety precautions for lightning chakra mode, not the complementary secret ninjutsu. In his hands, the technique's primary benefit was body enhancement. Its true fighting potential remained locked away. Unless he could develop an entirely new set of ninjutsu himself, he wouldn't be able to tap into that power. With memories from his previous life and 3 years of hard training, crafting custom techniques wasn't beyond him, but it would require time he simply didn't have. Maybe someday he'd experiment. For now, though, he had to let it go. After all, he'd only sought out lightning chakra mode to shore up the Palm Immortal technique's weaknesses in the first place. Nathan didn't bother with any of that and continued sorting through the extracted memories. Just then, Yanoso's eyes flew open. The sharp clarity in his gaze told Nathan everything. The illusion's grip had been broken. It made sense. Lightning chakra mode and all the ninjutsu that support it were secret techniques of the hidden Cloud Village. Although the third Raikage himself had once granted Yanoso permission to learn them, the village had still sealed away every related memory afterward. Nathan had to lure those suppressed memories into an illusion and then shatter the seals from within. Fortunately for him, Yanoso's own guardian seal and the sealing array he'd been outfitted with were already flawless, giving Nathan a solid foothold. On top of that, not long ago Nathan had perfected both the Four Symbols seal and the Self-Injury Curse seal. His mastery was at the very peak of level 6, nearly level 7, just enough to crack Yanoso's defenses. Without that edge, even capturing Yanoso alive didn't have delivered the secrets of lightning chakra mode. Of course, forcibly bursting the seal carries a price. It unleashes an overwhelming shock to the mind of the person on the receiving end, Yano. So would pay dearly for the knowledge he'd just regained. Nathan's Sharingan didn't even need to be withdrawn for Yano to wake up. He cracked open his eyes and lunged at Nathan. Yano's face twisted in rage and disbelief. He clearly grasped what Nathan had done. But before he could finish his sentence, Nathan flicked his eye open and unleashed the genjutsu, Sharingan. In an instant, Yano's consciousness was yanked back into the illusion. His chakra had already been sapped nearly dry, and with his physical and mental reserves all but gone, he was powerless to resist. Yano collapsed into the illusory world as if he'd been struck down, his body stiff and unresponsive. Nathan watched him slump, then turned his attention to the swirling memories now laid bare before him. He could not afford hesitation. Sliding through Yano's recollections with surgical precision, Nathan sifted toward the truth. 1 second, 2 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Time stretched on, but Nathan held his focus, diving deeper into the secrets of Yano's mind. 5 minutes passed, and still he searched every hidden corner, determined to uncover whatever information he needed. Nathan's eyes snapped open. "It still won't work," he muttered. He'd half expected this, yet when he confirmed that the supporting ninjutsu for lightning chakra mode remained unreadable, disappointment washed over him anyway. Breaking the seal so violently had come at a cost. Those techniques were now sealed from his memory forever. No matter how hard he tried, no matter if Yano So volunteered, he simply couldn't access that forbidden knowledge. It was a strict confidentiality measure imposed by the hidden cloud village. He shook his head, pushing frustration aside. Chakra gathered at his fingertips until his palm hardened into a razor-sharp blade. In a single motion, he slashed across his opponent's throat, ending the fight instantly. With practiced ease, he dragged the corpse to join the dozen cloud ninjas already lying lifeless around him. Among them, Akita Sato and Miura Naosuke, victims of his earlier strikes in lightning chakra mode. Raising his hand, Nathan wove a swift series of seals, fire chakra mode. With a loud crackling blast, a sphere of flame burst into being and engulfed the tangled heap of bodies. As he poured more chakra into the technique, the fire roared to life, consuming everything in its path. Within moments, flames erupted, engulfing every body in a searing inferno. Once Nathan was certain the fire would consume the corpses completely, he wasted no time and sprinted back toward his squad's position. Although the actual fight had been brief, poring over Yanoso's memories had taken far longer than he'd anticipated. If his intelligence was correct, the Hidden Cloud Village's third team would arrive on the battlefield any second now. Should his men fail to eliminate every member of the second team before then, the outcome could turn disastrous. He had to get back, fast. Chapter 698, End. A few minutes later, Nathan slipped back to his previous vantage point, melting into the shadows as he surveyed the battlefield. Relief washed over him. The worst had not happened. The third squad from Hidden Cloud had arrived just before the first team was wiped out. Yet, before they could join the fray, the only surviving jonin of the first squad fell to Konoha's veteran Shinobi, restoring parity at the jonin level. Even with a slight numerical edge and fresher chunin, Hidden Cloud's overall strength remained balanced against Konoha. As Nathan watched, the clash between the two forces raged at a fever pitch. Seizing his moment, he drew a single shuriken from his pouch and flung it into the air. With a swift series of hand seals, he activated the A-rank ninjutsu shuriken shadow clone technique. Instantly, that lone blade multiplied into hundreds more, each spinning under his precise control. In a burst of deadly winds, the storm of steel swept toward the nearest Kumogakure special jonin and his chunin, striking like a whirlwind of razor-sharp fury. Nathan's sudden assault threw their opponents into chaos. The Cloud Shinobi scrambled, narrowly evading his strike, and in that flash of confusion, the Hidden Leaf ninjas seized their chance to counterattack. Nathan watched with quiet approval. Elite Shinobi, he thought. Their timing and coordination outmatch ordinary fighters. In the world of shinobi warfare, victory often comes down to exploiting the smallest opening. By creating that first crack for the Leaf Warriors, Nathan had earned openings of his own. With the clash of steel and the flash of elemental jutsu all around him, he let his Sharingan flare to 3 tomei. Across the courtyard, a Kumogakure special jonin pressed forward, blade ringing against the kunai of a Leaf special jonin. Nathan's eyes tracked every shift in posture, every flicker of intent. In the same breath, he formed the seals and unleashed his next move. Fire style, Sushoku, he declared. A blazing sphere erupted from his hands and hurtled toward the Cloud Shinobi. In an instant, flame enveloped the man, consuming his uniform in an orange inferno. He howled in pain, stamping the ground and ripping at his scorched robes in a desperate bid to smother the flames. However, it proved useless. The more chakra Nathan poured into the flames engulfing his body, the fiercer they blazed. The nearby Konoha special jonin froze for a split second, then sprang into action, flinging a kunai with deadly precision. It struck the cloud-hidden special jonin mid-air. A sickening thud rang out as the blade pierced his chest. His pained scream cut off abruptly. He hovered for a moment, then collapsed in a crumpled heap, still wreathed in unquenchable fire. Nathan didn't bother to watch him burn. The instant his fire style, Sushoku Jutsu, connected, the outcome was decided. If the Konoha Jonin couldn't finish the job alone, Nathan would have every reason to suspect him of being an undercover agent. With that thought in mind, he shifted his focus to the remaining Kumogakure Chunin. Nathan's latest jutsu had caught the Cloud Ninja Squad off guard. Though they'd sidestepped his Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu, they were still unsteady, reeling from the frantic counterattacks of their comrades. Sensing the perfect opening, Nathan's Sharingan whirled into action, locking onto the nearest foe. With a muttered hand seal, he unleashed fire style, Sushoku Jutsu. A searing orb of flame blazed through the air. Ah! The ninja's scream cut off abruptly as the fireball struck home. Without pausing, Nathan pivoted to his next target. In the same fluid motion, seal, burst of flame, agonized cry, he claimed another victim. Elite Chunin they might have been, but against Nathan's pinpoint Sharingan and deadly ninjutsu, they had no hope of evading his assault. One by one, within a dozen breaths, Nathan dismantled the front line of Cloud Ninjas. When the last echoing scream faded, only silence remained, proof that for now he'd cleared the way. Because Nathan had only, he wounded the enemy here, and it was other Konoha Shinobi who delivered the final blows. Konoha suddenly found itself with fresh reinforcements to spare. Tap, tap, tap. Nathan slipped from his hiding place. The Konoha ninjas around him snapped to attention. "Captain, you've returned." He offered a curt nod, then swept his gaze across the battlefield and issued a single command. "Move out. Support the other squads." "Right away, Captain." His order rang out in perfect unison. The shinobi surged forward toward their embattled comrades. Nathan, meanwhile, wasted no time. He formed the necessary seals, activated the body flicker technique, and vanished in a streak of light as he raced to reinforce the 4 Kumogakure Jonin on the opposite flank. Those 4 Kumo Jonin had already noticed the ripple of change when Nathan first struck, and they'd remained on high alert ever since. Now, seeing him reappear among the defenders they were standing beside, their caution spiked, but hesitation at this point would only seal their fate. Nathan knew the enemy still might slip away, but the odds were far better than before. Gathering a handful of Konoha Jonin, he moved in on the remaining Kumogakure Jonin. Once their leaders were neutralized, the Kumogakure Chunin lost heart and scattered in every direction. Nathan chose not to chase them down. After assigning the final cleanup to his comrades, he dropped into a crouch and activated his medical ninjutsu. All around him lay wounded shinobi, some conscious, others barely clinging to life. He ignored the distant sounds of pursuit and focused on stanching bleeding, mending broken bones, and guiding panicked medics through complex chakra channels. It hadn't been a spotless victory. Hidden blades and lightning-fast strikes had found their marks. Several Konoha forces lay injured, and a few had even fallen. Under Nathan's usual watch, such wounds would have been almost unheard of. But earlier, he'd been tied up dealing with the 2nd Kumogakure squad and hadn't been able to oversee this flank. Now, with every ounce of his chakra poured into healing, he refused to let more lives slip away. As he wrapped bandages around a fading Chunin's arm, he whispered, "Hold on, you're coming back with me." The battlefield might still be chaotic, but Nathan's steady hands and unwavering focus promised a chance for survival to those who needed it most. Over the past few days, Konoha's shinobi came under coordinated assault from the remnants of the Hidden Cloud's 1st team and the entire 3rd team. Although there were casualties on our side, exclusively at the Chunin level, fortunately, no Jonin were lost. In any village, a Jonin's life is worth more than that of several Chunin, and when forced to choose, leaders will always protect their Jonin first. By that measure, our losses were acceptable. In contrast, the Hidden Cloud village paid a far steeper price. Their elite warriors from all 3 frontline teams were all but wiped out, and such a blow will take them time to recover from. With their advance now stalled, Nathan's objectives on this mission have been fully achieved. Chapter 699, Treatment and Demonstration. 6 injured Konoha ninjas lay scattered on the ground, their wounds ranging from minor cuts to serious fractures. The gravest injury belonged to one Chunin whose arm had been cleanly severed, fortunately not vaporized, by a strike from a Yuyin Jongren. Nathan knelt beside him without hesitation. First, he cleared away the blood and debris around the stump. Then he retrieved the severed limb, carefully aligned it with the patient's shoulder, and applied pressure to control the bleeding. A muffled groan escaped the Chunin's lips. He'd been stunned beforehand, but the pain of reattachment still coursed through him. Nathan cast a swift glance to confirm the man remained unconscious. Satisfied, he brought his hands together to form a tight seal and began to channel his chakra. With a quiet exhalation, he wove A-rank medical ninjutsu, the palm fairy technique. Nathan's chakra took on the character of yang-toned energy, coiling like a sinuous snake. He guided it along the meridians, drilling into the acupoints around the severed muscles and blood vessels. Under his steady focus, golden threads of chakra wove the torn flesh and bone back together, veins knit, nerves reconnected, and soon the broken arm lay whole once more against the Chunin's shoulder. Moments later, the injured man's fingers twitched. A soft gasp of amazement rose from the surrounding squad. The Chunin's eyes fluttered open. He flexed his hand experimentally, then sat up, staring at his restored limb in disbelief. "You, how?" he whispered. Nathan offered a calm, professional smile. "Standard reconnection technique. Just keep the bandages on and rest for a few days." Before anyone could speak, Nathan stood and moved to the next casualty. With equal efficiency, he cleaned, sealed, and healed fractures, sprains, and lacerations, cycling through each injured ninja. Even the most severe wounds closed under his touch, leaving the Leaf Shinobi both grateful and awestruck. When the last of the 6 was stabilized, Nathan wiped his hands on his cloak and addressed the small gathering. "The treatments will hold. Make sure they eat lightly and avoid strenuous activity for at least a week." A hush fell over the group before the Chunin he'd healed stood, bowed deeply, and said, "Thank you, Nathan. Without you, I'd—" "Rest," Nathan interrupted gently. "That's all." He turned, his expression serene, and walked away from the battlefield, leaving behind astonished allies murmuring about the Leaf's newest medical prodigy. Nathan closed his eyes and tuned into the flow of his Yangdi chakra channels, gently guiding their current toward the injured left arm. Instantly, a complex web of chakra meridians, like a network of glowing neural pathways, unfolded in his mind's eye. He could plainly see that around the fracture site, the meridians were twisted, broken in places, and hopelessly disordered. If he simply reset the bone without repairing these internal channels, the arm might heal outwardly, but would remain functionally dead. Nathan had no interest in delivering hollow results. His reputation as a medical ninja depended on genuine, lasting recovery. For the next 15 minutes, he patiently traced the errant meridians bit by bit, smoothing out each kink and restoring proper connections. When he was satisfied that the network was aligned, he formed a hand seal and activated his next jutsu, the fine disease extraction technique. Traditionally, this technique purges toxins and poisons from the body, but Nathan saw no reason to limit its use. He had already employed it once to facilitate an eye transplant. Now he would apply its purifying power to reorganize and strengthen the injured arm's chakra pathways. With a final surge of energy, Nathan felt the last remnants of disorder dissipate, leaving the meridians clear and ready to support a complete functional recovery. The primary purpose of the fine disease extraction technique is to empower medical ninjas to perform truly microscopic repairs, and it was proving its worth once again. By the time the half-hour slipped by, Nathan had already finished sealing the chakra meridians around the fractured arm. Now came the final, crucial phase, accelerating its regrowth. This level of technique posed no challenge for him. He raised his hand, wove a swift seal, and activated the palm immortal art. Summoning a rich surge of Yang-Dun chakra, he compressed it into a single focused beam that he launched straight into the injured limb. Immediately, blood flow and cellular regeneration kicked into overdrive. Any observer attuned to chakra would see the meridians knitting together at a speed visible to the naked eye. In mere moments, the fracture lines disappeared. When Nathan withdrew his gaze, the arm looked perfectly intact, save for being just a touch more slender than the uninjured one. There wasn't a seam, a scar, or the faintest hint of discontinuity. Nathan exhaled softly and opened his eyes, satisfied at the flawless restoration. A tired glimmer flickered in Nathan's eyes. Even for him, performing an operation of this complexity was no simple task. Without his palm fairy art and its specialized small illness extraction technique, which he'd painstakingly refined by studying human anatomy, he couldn't have succeeded. Nor could he have managed without his chakra control, honed to the very peak of level 6 and brushing the threshold of level 7, far beyond that of any ordinary shinobi. On top of that, his 22 points in spiritual attributes played a crucial role in sustaining such precision. If anyone else had attempted this procedure, they would have struggled to replicate his method. Not even Tsunade, the legendary medical saint, would have used the same approach. She might have been able to sever the necessary connections, but never with Nathan's unique combination of techniques. Orochimaru or any other formidable medical shinobi would have faced the same barrier. This success was entirely his alone. Yet Nathan still held back a secret. After unlocking his Mangekyo Sharingan, he'd gained an ocular jutsu that granted him microscopic control over his own body's cellular regulation, a final edge he'd yet to reveal. Nathan's concept of self-control extended far beyond mere willpower. It was the power to govern every facet of his being, organs, tissues, cells, even his very consciousness. At first, he believed this mastery applied only to himself, but as his monadic Sharingan continued to evolve, he discovered he could reach out and influence other bodies, too. Although the effect was weaker, dropping 1 or 2 levels in potency, his control over another person's physiology was real. With enough focus, Nathan realized he could guide fractured bones back into place as effortlessly as if they were his own. He'd assumed that such a feat would require a highly structured ritual, precise hand seals, exact chakra flows, even recitations of sacred incantations with zero room for error. To his surprise, none of that was necessary. All it took was pure will and the perfected form of his palm fairy art. On the training ground, the Konohagakure Chunin lay sprawled with a shattered forearm. A heartbeat later, Nathan directed his chakra, and they watched in awe as the bones reknit and flesh smoothed itself over the gap. Those witnessing the miracle could hardly believe their eyes. Murmurs of astonishment spread through the crowd, but it was Nathan's gaze, bright with exhilaration and humility, that spoke volumes. In the chaos of battle, there were no guarantees. Even the sharpest blade could falter, and the fiercest shinobi could fall. Yet with Nathan's unparalleled medical ninjutsu standing by, the wounded of Konoha could cling to hope when it mattered most. Given how smoothly things had gone, how could anyone fail to be impressed by Nathan? That was exactly why he'd taken such care to treat the injured shinobi lying before him. Once people recognized his worth, no one would dare lay a finger on him, and if anyone tried to stir up trouble, those with influence would step in. It didn't mean much to Nathan personally, but it would save him a world of trouble. A few extra minutes of effort was a small price to pay. "Captain, has it worked?" one of the Konoha Chunin asked, anxiety threading his voice. Nathan looked up. He recognized the young man. He and the wounded shinobi had risen through the ranks together since Genin. No wonder the Chunin was so tense. Nathan gave him a reassuring nod. "The link is secure. Just stay quiet for the next month. After that, everything will fall into place." "Thank you, Captain." The relief in the Chunin's voice was palpable. Nathan simply nodded again, then turned back to tend the other injured. He didn't ask about the results of the ongoing hunt for the remnants of the cloud-hidden sect. Today, that could wait. Nathan noted the looks on the returning shinobi's faces and already knew they'd succeeded. He didn't even have to read their expressions to be certain. After all, the pursuit had been led by Konoha Jonin, while the fleeing cloud shinobi were only a handful of Chunin. Short of outside interference, failure was impossible, and Nathan had scouted the area himself before they even engaged. There was no one else around. Their mission was a guaranteed victory. There was nothing more to ask. Chapter 700, The Return. By the time the sun dipped low on the western horizon, a full hour had slipped away. Nathan at last finished dressing the last of his comrades' wounds. What had once been crippling injuries now allowed only the most basic movement, but it was enough to get them back on their feet. He glanced skyward, the day's final light fading fast, and, allowing himself a single breath, gave the order. "Mission complete. Let's move out." "Yes, Captain," came the eager reply. With that, Nathan led the way, bounding along the path he and his team had blazed earlier. The forest had played tricks on them coming in. Strange twists of trail and hidden pitfalls had cost them well over an hour. Now, even with the wounded slowing their pace, they pressed forward with purpose. Barely 60 minutes later, they emerged from the looming shadows of ghost-crying forest and stepped back into familiar campgrounds just as dusk settled. Narafufeng rushed forward, astonished at their timely return, and a sudden, inexplicable chill of premonition curled in his chest. "You." Narafufeng fixed his gaze on Nathan, his voice tinged with eager anticipation. "Has the mission been completed?" Nathan met his eyes and nodded once, decisively. "Yes, we've neutralized the 3 squads sent by Union Village and averted the crisis." A low whistle escaped Narafufeng's lips. He'd half expected the outcome, but hearing Nathan confirm it in person still left him momentarily stunned. Those weren't ordinary fighters, but elite squads, and yet Nathan had dismantled them all in under 3 hours, despite scant intelligence and the treacherous terrain of the Weeping Ghost Forest. Anyone else would have needed days if they managed it at all. What impressed him most, though, was that Nathan had brought nearly every one of his team back in one piece. As he swept a proud, relieved glance over the survivors, Narafufeng couldn't suppress a broad grin. A reputation like Nathan's isn't built on empty words. His skill is genuinely earned. Narafufeng froze mid-step. 3 elite squads from Union Village had been wiped out so suddenly. Surely the enemy's frontline commanders hadn't heard the news yet? Their assault had never let up, and even the boldest ninjas from Yunshi Village would have reacted to such devastating losses. There was only one explanation. The enemy remained unaware, and the uninformed are fearless. Now was the perfect moment to strike. If Narafufeng launched a full-scale counterattack against Union's frontline forces, he could catch them utterly off guard. By the time they regrouped, reworked their strategy, and finally learned that their 3 elite teams had been annihilated, fear would have paralyzed them. They'd be too hesitant to mount any response, and they'd suffer ruinous losses. The more he thought it over, the more Narafufeng's pulse quickened. This was no mere skirmish. This was their chance to turn the tide. He turned to Nathan and asked, "How long do you think it will take the enemy to learn that our infiltration team has been wiped out?" Nathan's eyes flickered. It wasn't that he fancied himself a genius. It was simply that he'd anticipated this exact scenario after neutralizing the 3rd squad in Union Village. The moment his commander spoke, Nathan knew precisely what they were trying to achieve. He replayed the engagement in his mind. The ambush tactics, the signal jamming, the deliberate trail of misinformation. Even if the enemy managed to dispatch a courier, the message would almost certainly be intercepted, or arrive so late as to be meaningless. The idea that the entire infiltration team had been annihilated in one fell swoop was implausible. There were too many variables in play. And even if a lone survivor from Union Village slipped through the net, by the time his report reached home base, events would have moved on. Nathan met his commander's gaze and replied calmly, "They might pick up fragmentary rumors, but they'll never get the full story. We still have time." Narafufeng froze, surprise flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected Nathan to read him so easily, and for a moment he regarded the young man with newfound respect. Then he shook his head, dismissing the thought, and turned back to the group. "All right, get some rest," he said. "The enemy may mount a counterattack soon. When they do, I'll need you to be at your best." Though his words implied they'd join the next engagement, Narafufeng actually intended to hold them back as a strategic reserve. Their mere presence would discourage Yunnin's frontline from launching an uncoordinated counterstrike. An impulsive attack made without proper intel could cost them dearly. Nathan glanced around at his companions and gave a firm nod. The skirmish they'd just endured had been barely a challenge for him. His chakra had fully recovered on the march back to camp. But he was the exception. Many of the others hadn't healed so quickly. Several were still laid up with injuries that limited their mobility, even after the medics had worked their best. They needed time to rest and recuperate, just as Narafufeng had ordered. Nathan paused and assessed the situation. If he kept plunging into battle, he'd be sending his teammates to certain death. After going toe-to-toe with 2 elite Union squads, the rest of his team was utterly spent. They desperately needed time to recover. That made him the only one left with any real combat strength. It only made sense to lay low for a while. In truth, he'd already raced for the past 2, nearly 3 days, hustling to this position to prevent any ambushes along the way. Today was supposed to be the day his Sharingan Manjikyo would break through its next stage, 40,000 out of 50,000 points. But when Nathan opened his status panel, the numbers were discouraging. 39,705 of 50,000. At that rate, it would take well over a day just to reach 40,000. Those detours and skirmishes had set him back at least 3 days. And that was only the Sharingan's evolution. His other abilities were even further behind schedule. Since he could reasonably afford to take it easy now, he wasn't about to argue. This downtime would be invaluable for making up lost progress and ensuring he returned to the field stronger than ever. Nathan nodded to Nara Fufeng without another word. "All right, let me know if anything comes up." With that, he turned and led his squad away from the command center. Once they cleared the tent's threshold, Nathan halted and addressed them. "You heard the orders in there. Go get some rest. Use this downtime to recover." "Understood, Captain," they chorused, saluted, and dispersed into the camp. Left alone, Nathan returned to his assigned quarters, a roomy canvas tent more than adequate for a field officer. He paused at the entrance, then withdrew a hand seal. A perfect shadow clone sprang into being and settled itself at headquarters in his stead. Nathan packed lightly, securing only what he needed on his person. Concentrating, he activated the Flying Thunder God technique. In an instant, he vanished in a flash of blue light and reappeared in the thick forest just outside Takigakure village, exactly 100 kilometers from where his clone kept watch. Here, hidden beneath a canopy of ancient trees, Nathan summoned the heart-to-heart technique. Drawing on the spiritual link between himself and his shadow duplicate, he reached out across the distance. He knew his clone was monitoring every movement inside the village, filtering updates back to him through this psychic bridge. 3 days had passed in this manner. Now Nathan settled behind a mossy log, closed his eyes, and waited for news. He didn't yet know what was unfolding within the hidden village's walls, but whatever it was, he would be ready. 3 days ago, Nathan's shadow clone returned with urgent intelligence. Takigakure village is planning a 7-tails transplant experiment within the week. The lack of an immediate alert suggested they still have matters under control. But Nathan couldn't shake his unease. Before diving back into his training, he decided it was best to visit the area in person and take the measure of the situation himself.